Hello, welcome to the Fanfic Majesty. If you want more content, you can follow me on Patreon. I will be uploading more content on there that will be exclusive. The link is in the description. Please support me.
7SS Chapter 151 Proposal Previous Chapter Next Chapter. Advertisement Boom. Hayden suddenly exploded with the spiritual pressure on his body. At the moment when everyone present, including Boya Hancock, had no time to react, an invisible aura suddenly enveloped them. They know that this is not how they feel alone at the moment, and all the companions they see have the same reaction as themselves. Suffocation, weakness, body as if being held down by a heavy object.
At this moment, it seems that they can see this space with their naked eyes. A certain super abnormal breath resonates with the space, producing a jitter visible to the naked eye, blurring the horizon in front of them.
Hayden's violent spiritual pressure swept across the perfumed snakes unscrupulously. I seized the pirate ship in an instant, and even the two giant snakes that were enough to deter the Sea King came out of the bow. Under such a sense of oppression, they trembled as if some terrifying creature was pressing on them, staying helplessly in place. The perfumed serpent, which was slowly sailing, stopped on the windless belt at this moment. Between the heaven and the earth here, there was a sudden silence. The two sisters were so quiet that they were standing next to Boya Hancock, and the voices of swallowing saliva could be heard clearly. This weird phenomenon was not caused by the Overlord domineering, but the result of Hayden being several times or even dozens of times higher than this group of female pirates at the moment. The oppression from the depths of the soul makes them unable to control the body's ability to act, and they can only let the oppressed soul at this moment make action decisions. Puff. 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 After a moment of dead silence, there was such a strange sound. Advertisement, feeling a slight vibration from the deck, raising her head to look at Hancock and Hayden, she realized that the people under her could not withstand the strange pressure in the environment at this moment. One by one fell down one after another, and the weak body seemed to be drawn from the soul by something invisible in an instant. At this moment, apart from her and her two sisters, no one can remain standing. The three of them were left behind, leaving a look of horror on their three faces involuntarily. Facing the current situation, Boya Hancock could no longer maintain the calm posture he had just now. As the owner of the domineering look, she knew very well that the situation she was experiencing was not caused by the domineering look. However, it still appeared as if the Overlord domineering launch. Sister, this guy is very wrong. The two younger sisters standing beside Boya Hancock had extremely cautious expressions on their faces, and the cold sweat on their foreheads was clearly visible. The two of them could barely keep standing under such pressure. If they wanted them to make an attack under such pressure, they knew that it was impossible. Read more at hotmtlnovel.zi. Hancock listened to the words from the two younger sisters, and she naturally knew the severity of the current situation, and looked at the man above with solemn expression. If it was not caused by the Overlord domineering, then what kind of ability can achieve the current impact? The move just now, without even thinking about it, must have been caused by this person. Hancock didn't dare to shoot at will like just now, and he didn't know what other methods this man had. Immediately afterwards, I saw the man above move. Then, looking down, the only three female Emperor sisters who were still standing. Read more at hotmtlnovel.zi. Chinese MTL fan fiction, second element novel can be read at hotmtl novel for free. Hayden looked at the group below, either lying on the deck with their backs on their backs, or lying on the deck with their exposed female pirates. He was very satisfied with the spiritual oppression he had burst out. Advertisement, you guy. He nodded his head and couldn't help but smile. Although I am a Rear Admiral of the Navy, I really don't want to kill you either. Hayden said indifferently with a smile on his face. I haven't seen you. So, in this case, Hancock made a decision quickly. If this happens, what can she do even if she alone has superhuman strength? Hayden made a proposal for Boya Hancock below this moment. After all, he really didn't want to kill Boya Hancock. As the Emperor of the Amazon Lily Kingdom, the captain of the 9 snakes and pirates, and the owner of the Overlord, she will never make decisions based on the enemy's will. Although she said that she didn't care, no one would remain indifferent if her hometown was brutally destroyed. The three Hancock sisters did not respond, and the expressions on their faces were still as expressionless as before. Hayden didn't care and continued. Hancock thought about the next development in his mind. Hancock's expression turned colder than before. When he said this, he couldn't help tilting his head, frowning a little curiously. Boya Hancock is confident that she is better than this disgusting man. She took a deep breath, and she was not going to hesitate any longer. Hayden looked at the Empress as if he wasn't ready to agree. He only had the last way he had thought of just now. Hayden stared at Hancock's big eyes below, staring in awe. And Boya Hancock was silent for a moment. Advertisement. All these cover all Hayden's favorite points about women. He must find a way to get it. How? Hayden quickly said after seeing it. You should know that our Navy has warships that can freely travel through the windless zone, right? Tall figure, white thighs. Hancock stopped the activation of his ability. I have one more thing to say, he hurriedly motioned to Hancock. It is quite common for accidents to happen in the windless zone, let alone a Navy acting alone. She didn't wait for the man's unfinished words, stared at the figure of the man above, and pointed her loving hands at the man. She listened to this, and the look in the man's eyes became more and more disgusting. Although she has a trace of fear for this man who is full of strange things, she will not just rely on this, she will accept this proposal honestly. She also didn't intend to respond to the man's proposal. Her hands had already posed a loving gesture again. And many more. Around your Amazon Lily Island, there are huge nests of sea kings. In the past, some harassers were naturally isolated. But, what would it look like if it were occupied by naval ships? The current female emperor is much younger, although the imperial sister temperament on her body is still slightly immature. However, immature also has immature flavor. The scene that the man said, as if it were a real memory, instantly appeared in the minds of the three Hancock sisters. The three female emperor sisters on the lower deck were suddenly a little curious. This is the situation. What else does this man say? Looking at Hancock below, Hayden suddenly didn't know what was going on. He felt that at this moment, he seemed to be a bit unkind, but he just wanted to beg for food. Chapter 152 Hancock vs. Hayden Previous chapter Next chapter. Advertisement. Sweet and sweet wind. Hancock unleashed her real attack. The seemingly powerless pink love heart, at this moment, is like a wave, constantly flying in the direction of Hayden, as if it instantly added a layer of girly filter to this space. Hayden looked at the scene before him, and he narrowed his eyes. The Empress really didn't plan to make a little compromise. The storm of love that appeared in front of him made him feel quite a headache. It would be okay if the female emperor's sweet fruits ability didn't work for him, and the next thing to do would be much less troublesome. However, I can't resist the instinct of being a man at all. For any attack by the Empress, Hayden could only choose to avoid as much as possible, instead of head-on collision with her tricks. If you hit it head-on, you must quickly form a layer of material to wrap your body and isolate the sweet fruit. Hayden shook his head and quickly stepped away from the top of the cabin. Where? Boya Hancock was not surprised again that Hayden had escaped her attack. Afterwards, she flashed a trace of icy eyes and immediately looked at the mast on the top of the cabin. She sensed the breath of this man appearing on it instantly. Hayden's feet landed on the mast with a soft noise. Domineering, not domineering to deal with this ability is really troublesome. Advertisement. He stared at the figure of Boya Hancock below, thinking silently in his heart. Although his speed can easily dodge the attack of the Empress, it is not a way to avoid it all the time. Moreover, although I don't know how much energy Hancock needs to activate his ability. But from the lightness of her ability to activate, and she should have guessed that she was afraid to face her attack. In other words, I should know what her ability is. Trouble, Hayden thought quickly in his heart, thinking of this. At this time, the Empress suddenly jumped high and rushed towards Hayden's position without warning. Two long legs in high heels slammed on the deck, and the slender figure looked like a sharp arrow facing Hayden. Hayden looked down at the approaching Hancock with blinking eyes. Hancock raised his head and stared at Hayden, giving him a cold look. Since my long-range attack can't hit this man, then close combat is fine. At this time, Hancock's robe kept slamming under her extreme speed. Only from this momentum, Hayden knew that this move would definitely not be good. He did not catch this move at all. Thoughts? Read more at hotmtlnovel.zi. Immediately after that, the gap between the two people at this time was only the width of one leg. There is no extra action. Hancock twisted his body abruptly, his right leg stretched out suddenly, like a white whip, and kicked it towards Hayden, who was standing on the mast with a slap. Aromatic feat. The attack towards Hayden did not show any effect. It seemed to be just an ordinary kick, but in fact, this is not only Boa Hancock's close to perfect kicking technique that has been practiced for many years, but also an attack with her sweet fruit ability. With this blow, the petrification ability of sweet fruit will have an effect no matter whether the opponent rises to admiration for her beauty or not. This blow was a blow that could kick Hayden directly into pieces. Advertisement, Shanto. Hayden rushed to leave the mast that had been standing for a second at the last minute. Then, Hancock originally intended to directly sweep and kick the man into two halves of the attack. After losing the target, he directly kicked the erected mast. Accompanied by this sudden explosion like loud noise and smoke, Hancock's move is estimated to be able to directly kick and destroy the scented feet of a ship and cut off the first mast of her ship. First contact with the mast that was petrified after Hancock attacked. Naturally, he couldn't bear the aftermath of the strongest power offset. The mast now became as fragile as an eggshell, and then it shattered. The part of the mast she kicked was not the topmost part of the mast, there was still more than half of it. The broken mast that had lost its support naturally fell downward. At this time, Hayden, who was standing at the other end of this mast, looked at the broken mast in his eyes. The mast is slowly falling in the direction between the bow and the side of the ship. After this thing falls, it will definitely hit a part of the deck below, and the female pirates who were oppressed by his spirit on the deck just now, at this time haven't been able to stand up yet. However, before he waited for another second to consider, the two younger sisters of Hancock immediately shot and blocked the mast that was about to be smashed on the deck. At the same time, Hancock, who retracted his attack, was standing on the horizontal mast, which was at the other end of where Hayden was standing, and now the two of them were like two birds, hanging on the cross. Hancock didn't speak, and after checking the situation on the deck, there was no problem. She then turned her eyes back to the man opposite her. Hayden also happened to look at Hancock at this time. The eyes of the two collided. Hayden hurriedly told her with his eyes, "It doesn't matter to me, it is your own cause." Hancock, with a cold face, didn't care so much. Her domineering eyes shot at Hayden like lightning. She was not discouraged by the successive failures of the attacks. Hancock knows very well that although this man is now very fast, but there are always mistakes. As long as his attack is wiped on him, the man must be over. Advertisement. Immediately afterwards, Hancock started again suddenly. The high heels were walking on the mast as if walking on flat ground, and a series of hurried sounds of choo-choo sounded, and then she rushed to Hayden at the moment. "You are still enthusiastic." Hayden looked at Hancock, and then thrust Senbon Sakura back into the scabbard behind him. Senbon Sakura's ability is transformed into thousands of thin blades by the blade, and it still has a solid body, but it becomes a cherry blossom under the refraction of light. This means that Hancock's ability should be able to produce results. He has never tested whether Zhanpakudao can resist the influence of this type of ability, and he does not want to take this risk. If by the time I started to recover, there would be big or small gaps on the blade, it would be embarrassing. Ling Wu, Shu Baishui. Hayden looked at Hancock, who struck, and silently read Shirayuki's first solution in his hands. Then, this moment. In Hancock's sight, the blade that was about to be kicked and turned into fragments suddenly burst into a strong white mist. She strangely felt a real cold breath on the right leg that she kicked out, as if the temperature in the environment had suddenly dropped to zero. Boom! Shirayuki and Hancock's kick hit the sleeve Shirayuki, who had started to solve in an instant. A violent bang immediately sounded at the point where the two collided. The momentum of the impact instantly shook a wave of air visible to the naked eye, spreading to the surroundings, as if the aftermath of the fighting had stirred up the surge of space. Hayden was immediately pushed out of the standing mast by the force of Hancock's legs, until his feet stepped on the foothold created by the spirit, and stood on the air. The two reached a deadlock. Chapter 153, Great Sword of Ice. Previous chapter. Next chapter. Advertisement, Yugai. Hancock's eyes were full of shock. This is not only because Hayden has created a great sword of ice that is like a natural ability, but also because of the line of sight from the corner of her eye. This man seems to be standing on the flat ground, standing in the air. After being pushed out of the mast by her, the man should have fallen down. Just now the man stepped up into the air, and Hancock knew that this man could be considered as flying. However, the situation in this man's body at the moment is completely different. The way he used to step on the air, at least he had to use strength under his feet, but now, his feet seem to be stepping on something she can't see, just like walking flat in the sky. Hancock, she had never heard of anyone standing in the air like this, which was unheard of. At this moment, her jade feet rubbed against the blade of the great ice sword that the man didn't know how to conjure, and the place where they struck aroused a thick cloud of stone dust, which filled between them. Hancock's foot strength can only achieve this level. She clenched her silver teeth and exerted her strength, but she couldn't break through the man's defense. And her petrification ability, the effect is produced on this ice sword. However, she had just petrified the ice layer on the surface, and after it shattered, she froze again. Her petrochemical ability has never touched the real body wrapped in ice. At this moment, Hayden tried his best to control his gaze not to look at the wonderful part. He smiled amicably at Hancock, whose expression was slightly sullen, holding the instant reinforced sleeve Shirayuki with both hands, and then slammed her out with a violent force. After this test, Hayden also had a solution for the next action. It seems that the situation suddenly fell to my side. Advertisement, he thought to himself in his heart. Using Su Baishui's freezing ability to create solid ice cubes, as long as his ice-making speed can exceed Hancock's petrochemical ability, then it is my victory. Hayden couldn't help laughing. Although there is no domineering to resist, but this is almost the same. Her speed is faster than Hancock. As long as she dodges her ability or offsets it, there is not much threat to nature. As expected of me, my lack of arrogance for the time being does not stump me. Hayden. However, he looked at Hancock, who had moved away after a few jumps. Why didn't she move? He was a little puzzled. Hancock stared at Hayden's figure at this time. She didn't know what attack the man was going to make next. After Hayden thought about it for a second, he stopped thinking about it. Anyway, now this situation is obviously impossible to solve properly. It is better to let him end this game quickly. Immediately, Hayden's hands holding Shu Baishui suddenly used force, enveloping the ice of Shu Baishui's entity, and once again expanded in a circle. At this moment, Shu Baishui's ice sword is already as big as his own. Read more at hotmtlnovel.zi. In order to prevent Hancock's petrochemical ability from suddenly speeding up, he prepared Xie Baishui's protection in advance. This man, Hancock, who was standing on the mast opposite him, looked very cautious. This man had been in a situation that she could not even look at from the beginning, but now it makes her feel very troublesome. The ultimate victor of this battle is her. She has not changed in her heart, but the process. Suddenly, Advertisement Hayden kicked the clump of spirit under his feet and rushed towards Hancock. HMPH. Hancock, who had recovered his senses, did not hesitate at all. After a cold snort, he stepped on the mast and directly directed at the attacking Hayden, and greeted him. At the same time, her sweet fruit ability was instantly activated. A pink physical love appeared quietly on the left hand, giving people the impression of a Q-bomb. Immediately after she was running, she pinched this love point with her right hand, and then pulled it back as if she was drawing a bow. Captive arrow. At once, under the action of Hancock's bow, the pink heart suddenly shot arrows like falling rain, one by one, instantly covering the field of vision in front of Hayden.
Each pink arrow shot from the love heart represents an attack that is enough to turn Hayden into pieces. The captive arrow has the same effect as the aromatic foot. Even if the opponent does not have a heart of admiration, the petrification ability of the sweet fruit can still play a role. However, Hayden, who was facing Hancock, did not panic.
With lightning speed, the ice sword held in both hands suddenly rose toward the empty space in front of him. Then, accompanied by a rustling sound, in Hancock's eyes, a huge ice wall just blocked her prisoner's arrows, and the range of the ice wall just blocked all her arrows. Tweeted. 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 The arrow hit the ice wall, completely petrified the ice wall. The ice wall that was still exuding bone-chilling chill in the last second turned into a stone wall that would shatter with the touch of it. At this moment, both Hayden and Boya Hancock did not hesitate, and were not surprised by what happened before them. Boom! Immediately afterwards, Hayden's figure broke through the stone wall, and the ferocious aura brought up the thick smoke. Advertisement Hancock was already in front of Hayden at this time. Immediately, she supported the mast under her with both hands, and with the support of the mast, a set of fragrant feet kicked out, and the attack momentum gathered was as violent as a rainstorm. Boom! 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 Hayden, who was sprinting momentum, was immediately stopped by this turbulent momentum. Even under this set of attacks, his figure was beaten backwards, and the great sword of ice continued to fall and crack stone. Hayden's brows were locked together. He focused on capturing all Hancock's attacks towards him at this moment, waving the ice sword in his hand to block all the tricky, cruel kicks. For a time, in the eyes of Hancock's two younger sisters who could only watch the battle, the older sister on the top had already fought this man for hundreds of turns. At this moment, the sky above the mast of the perfume snake has become a forbidden area where their subordinates dare not move forward. Hancock's two younger sisters have not met their older sister, and they have encountered this situation. On their island, no one can fight this kind of situation with her sister. At this time, they suddenly worried about the sister. Hayden looked at Hancock in front of him, and he cursed inwardly with a headache. How could this woman's attack not stop? Even after a while, he was still passively defending Hancock's attack. Her physical strength seemed like a bottomless pit. As for Hayden himself, although his physical strength has been trained to a terrifying level, under the threat of petrochemical ability, he dared not stop his ice-making action for a moment. Stopping the ice-making means that his ice armor will be smashed by Hancock in an instant, and the next second she will attack the entity of Shu Baishui. This is very difficult for his spiritual pressure consumption, even if his spiritual pressure is already considered acceptable, but he can't stand it. Chapter 154 Sudden Accident Previous chapter Next chapter. Advertisement Hayden stared at Hancock, who was right in front of him at the moment. Although the scenery in front of him was beautiful, he didn't want to look at it as if he was struck by a 20-ton hammer. Boom! 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 At this time, Hancock's attack was not only about the ability to bring sweet fruits, because in her eyes this man was suspected of being frozen by the ability of natural fruits. She also brought arm dominance that Hayden didn't have with every shot. The sudden increase in power made the Hayden Ice Greatsword collapse faster and faster. However, it was at this time when Hayden was still in passive defense. He seemed to perceive something. His pupils suddenly shrank. In Hayden's perception of Reiki at this moment, even if he didn't specifically turn on the exploration now, he suddenly felt a cold in the back of his neck, and then he seemed to be pricked by a needle in his brain. This is a wonderful feeling in his brain that is warning him. Immediately, Hayden didn't think anymore. The ice sword in his hand suddenly slashed at Hancock, who was constantly attacking him, forcing her to distance himself from him so that he could carefully observe the surrounding environment. Hancock has quick eyes and quick feet. Seeing this sudden and powerful slash, she naturally wouldn't take it directly, supporting the ground with both hands and quickly backflips and withdrew in the direction behind her. After a while, Hancock, who had withdrawn a few steps, stood firm, and she was immediately ready for the attack. However, in her eyes, only the man in front of him could be seen. The posture he was posing now seemed as if he hadn't put her in his eyes, posing a posture full of flaws. The man was standing in the air, looking down, not knowing where he was looking. Hancock frowned for a moment. Advertisement She didn't understand what the man was doing after stopping in the middle of the match. Hayden's spiritual pressure instantly spread below the surrounding sea. At this moment, his sixth sense of crisis is telling him that something dangerous is about to happen. And in this windless zone, there should be only one dangerous thing. Then Hayden felt it. At this moment, under the sea near the ship where he was staying, an aura similar to Sea King activities appeared quietly at this time. Moreover, he also felt countless vague and faint auras, which seemed to be swimming in the deep waters under their ship, and were slowly swimming towards the current ship's position. F*K. Don't need to think too much about him and continue to think more. He immediately understood the situation at the moment. As said before, read more at hotmtlnovel.zi. The two giant snakes on the bow of the perfume snakes can deter some sea kings, yes, but they only deter some. The perfume snake has stopped here for such a period of time, and their breath is estimated to have spread far away, and those big guys who are not afraid of these two snakes are naturally attracted. Get out of this sea quickly. What does he mean by this? They felt the sensation weighing more than 10 tons weighing on them at this moment, and suddenly disappeared. The heavy object that was invisible to them was quietly moved away by something. Hancock realized that this is not the time to continue fighting. As the captain of the 9 snakes and pirates, she couldn't be the result of the destruction of the 9 snakes and pirates on her first voyage. Now she must immediately lead the crew and leave here. Read more at hotmtlnovel.zi. Chinese MTL fan fiction, second element novel can be read at hotmtl novel for free. The man who was still fighting with him just now showed a look of looking at other places after he stopped, and then asked her if there is any way to leave this sea area quickly. Advertisement. Just when this question arose in her mind, she immediately thought of a terrible thing. It seems to be gone. For Hayden, it would be okay if it were just 2 or 3. However, if the large sea kings attacked like a swarm, this crisis would not be easy for him to solve. Boya Hancock's face instantly sank. Considering this in an instant, Hayden felt that this senseless battle was over. This is Hancock's answer to Hayden with a cold face. Now this is only possible in the Neptune class. Immediately, Hayden furrowed his brows and withdrew the unbridled spiritual pressure. Get ready for sailing and leave urgently. Hey. Hayden turned his gaze to look at Hancock on the opposite side. I think we need to stop now, he said with a serious expression on Hancock's eyes. Of course, he can directly use Lingza to ascend to the sky, so high that the large sea kings can't attack it. However, leaving the Empress woman in the ship trapped in place, he didn't think that the current Empress had the strength to solve this level of trouble. Although they didn't understand the current situation of Lord Snake G and this man, they only listened to Lord Snake G's voice and gave orders. She can't do it alone if she wants to run this ship. She not only needs the 2 swimming snakes on the bow of the ship to move, but also needs her crew to do their own work. However, if you want this guy who is difficult to tell the outcome of a fight with her, and have the idea of wanting to leave this sea area, it is only possible that the number of sea kings has exceeded the range of his strength. Advertisement. Knowing the meaning of Hancock's words, Hayden knew that the ship only had to sail by the 2 giant snakes on the bow. This is the real trouble. These various performances were put together into a complete puzzle in Hancock's heart, and the puzzle was written with the 3 characters, Neptune. Damn it. At this time, everyone on the lower deck immediately reacted, including the 2 giant snakes on the bow. Bad things are about to happen, and they must happen. Even people who live outside the windless zone know that this windless zone is extremely dangerous, so as people living in the windless zone, they naturally know the degree of danger. Is there anything on your ship that can leave this sea area in an instant by maneuvering quickly? Although it should not be, he thought of the Sunny's wind cannon and asked Hancock about the possibility of this ship. No matter what you did just now, quickly unlock the abilities of my crew. Hancock looked at Hayden expressionlessly. Hayden looked down at the calm blue sea with a serious expression on his face. No. Hancock was suddenly puzzled by the meaning of the man's words. But she didn't respond either, only her eyes motioned him to continue. Looking at Hancock, Hayden thought in his heart, is there any way to quickly take the people on their ship away from this sea? Hancock felt that the temperament of this man suddenly became serious, unlike the indifferent expression just now. The female pirates of the 9 snakes and pirates immediately got up from the deck and all looked up at their masters. Chapter 155 Turtle in the Urn. Previous chapter. Next chapter. Advertisement. Yes. The female pirates of the 9 snakes and pirates on the deck did not hesitate, and immediately responded loudly. They don't need to understand the situation at this time, and they don't need to hesitate. What their Lord Snake G said is the highest order for them. Immediately, a group of female pirates quickly returned to their posts before Hayden, the uninvited passenger, boarded the ship. After Hancock finished speaking, she didn't pay attention to the man next to her. She stepped on the mast violently and jumped directly onto the head of a giant snake on the bow, giving the 2 giant snakes the order to leave here as quickly as possible. Afterwards, Hayden followed Hancock's figure, stepping into the air and jumping onto the giant snake's head next to her. Hancock didn't react to him following him, just glanced at the man next to him, and stopped paying attention to the man. At this time, the huge snake under the feet of the 2 is dragging the big ship hard, slowly speeding up the sail on the sea. The windless sea in front of the 2 of them was still a scene of calm waves, which had not changed much from the previous situation, and was ordinary and silent. But If Hayden and Hancock standing on the bow of the ship at this moment, they both did not feel the inexplicable sense of threat coming from the deep blue sea under the ship. Yes, ordinary and silent. At this time, Hayden frowned and looked at the calm sea below, feeling the great threat that was gathering around them. He couldn't help but ask Hancock next to him. "Hey, can't the speed of this ship be faster? Advertisement?" He heard the slightly anxious words in Hancock's ears, making her already very irritable mood even more anxious. No, Hancock didn't even glance at Hayden next to him, and immediately replied impatiently. "If she had a way to speed up, she would have used it right away, and still need to wait for you to remind me." Hayden didn't intend to continue speaking, and then retracted Shirayuki's sleeve into the scabbard on his back. At the same time, under the deep blue sea, the sense of danger that was slowly coming towards them has never been reduced, and they are still continuing to approach, as if their ship has been selected as the target, and then completely locked. Approaching little by little. And the perfume snake under their feet at this time. The speed of this ship is improving a little. However, Hayden felt that they had never opened up the distance from the guys hidden in the sea. Hayden didn't know what coup is available to solve the current crisis smoothly. Immediately afterwards. Read more at hotmtlnovel.zi. In Hancock's eyes, she suddenly noticed that a huge black shadow appeared on the sea in front of her, hiding in the sea and swimming back and forth. Her eyes narrowed immediately, and she immediately realized that the dark shadow must be a sea king. At the same time, just as Hancock noticed this phenomenon, Hayden also noticed the situation at the moment. And he not only noticed this single phenomenon, he also immediately noticed the phenomenon spreading in the sea near the ship at this moment. "Damn it! It's coming!" Hayden shouted directly without hesitation, reminding Hancock next to him. Hancock looked at Hayden abruptly, and she was also aware of the situation following her. Advertisement at this time. Even the ordinary crew members of the 9 snake pirates in various positions on the ship seemed to smell the smell in the air that represented an unknown. Everyone present on the boat, including Hayden and Hancock at the bow, had almost the same expressions on their faces at this time, with solemn expressions on their faces.
Subsequently, move on. Hancock has not yet grown up to the pirate empress of the period in the original plot. Although she is strong, she is not yet as strong as that in the original story. She naturally reacted the same way to the scene before her. It's just that she can recover in an instant, but she also has no good way to solve the immediate crisis.
Hayden's face was already ugly to the point that he couldn't even think of it, and the thinking in his mind immediately started to spin. Super large Sea King class. In the sight of both Hayden and Hancock at the bow of the ship, both of them noticed that the calm sea surrounding the ship near their feet suddenly raised large and small sea bags, as if something is about to break through from below the surface of the sea. "By the way, there is Master Snake G. We will be fine." But after looking around, I couldn't find a place where they could get out of the ship in any direction. At this moment they couldn't think, couldn't act, they just stared with wide eyes and opened their mouths, looking up at the scene surrounding them at this moment in a daze. Large Sea King class. Boom, 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 calm. The bodies protruding high above the sea looked down at the things surrounded by them, and they gave the people on the ship the feeling that they were placed on the dining table of giant creatures. However, as the captain of the ship, she immediately yelled. Immediately, the sound resounding everywhere on the ship calmed their panicked hearts. Advertisement. The two of them were so panicked that they could only look at their backbone, your sister. A series of roars suddenly sounded. On the bow deck behind Hancock are her 2 younger sisters. After a moment, because he was too surprised to speak, the huge momentum aroused by the waves soaring into the sky gathered into a terrifying scene that was enough to frighten people. It was just a Neptune that would make most people in this world feel terrified. At this time, there was an innumerable number of Neptunes. The crew of the 9 snake pirates immediately thought of their Lord Snake G. Lord Snake G must have a way to deal with the current situation, and everyone immediately turned their eyes to Lord Snake G, who was standing on the bow at the moment. To be honest, Hayden hadn't seen the exaggerated scene before him at this moment. Now it's really a turtle in the urn. The Aquaman group now controls this space. What the hell is happening now? Just the body that protrudes out of the sea should be 100 meters high, and the body shape of each head is amazing. But for the Neptunes, these people can only be regarded as snacks. What should I do now? Read more at hotmtlnovel.zi. Chinese MTL fan fiction, second element novel can be read at hotmtl novel for free. Hayden stood on the head of the giant snake and looked around at the surrounding environment. He wanted to find a gap where the ship could leave the enclosure. It was as if a large mountain suddenly uprooted on the surface of the sea around their ship, enclosing their ship in a circle. Sister, in an instant, the crew of the 9 snakes and pirates were shattered by the absurd scene in front of them. After a second, something really broke through from under the sea. Chapter 156. Join hands. Previous chapter. Next chapter. Advertisement time is at this moment, slowly flowing away every second. The feeling that time flies by in the past, slowed down at this moment, and felt very clear. The people of Hayden and the 9 snakes and pirates were trapped in a group of sea kings in the windless zone. This is not a place for them to stay, nor for anyone else. At this moment, almost all of the sky was covered by the surrounding group of Neptunes, losing their bright line of sight. Hayden turned his body to look left and right. He still couldn't find a gap in the encircled direction, allowing them to get out of the encircling circle. The dignified atmosphere permeating the perfume snake is already so strong at this time that as long as someone opens their mouth, then this breath will take advantage of the situation and feel suffocated. Hancock was standing on the deck of the bow at this time. She looked up at the surrounding sky and looked at the group of sea kings that surrounded them. Although she gave the order to move on, she didn't know which direction could get them to move forward at the moment. Hayden jumped from the head of the giant snake to Hancock's side. "Do you have any ideas? Now is the time to come up with a good solution," he asked casually toward Hancock. Hancock heard this question, and then turned to look at the man. "Make a way." She did not hesitate at all and made the decision domineeringly. "Just open a way." Hayden, who also looked at the surrounding sky, muttered to himself. He didn't think this group of sea kings would let them pass so honestly. It would be easy to do it if it was just a way out. It would be simple for them to kill a sea king, and Hancock herself could do it without too much effort. Don't look at the sea kings who surrounded them at this moment and haven't attacked yet. Advertisement. Although I don't know when it was, but the group of Neptunes surrounded them not with the same mentality of looking at animals. They would definitely attack the perfume snake. And this group of large-scale sea kings, which had dozens of heads to say nothing, attacked at the same time, only by the combination of Hayden and Hancock, who were the most powerful on board, could not handle. Immediately afterwards, the Neptune class surrounding them began to take action. Dozens of huge sea kings slowly moved their huge bodies. Although in the eyes of everyone on the ship, the movement speed of this group of sea kings seems a bit slow, but in fact, their speed has exceeded the limit that ordinary people can't imagine. F*K. Hayden cursed while watching the attack that was about to hit them. In the same way, he was not the only one who caused the reaction by this Neptune-like action. The expressions of the crew of the 9 Snakes pirates, including Hancock's 2 sisters, became more frightened at this moment. They don't need to try. They know that their attacks are a bit exaggerated for this level of sea kings. Be prepared. Read more at hotmtlnovel.zi. Hayden at the bow did not pay attention to the movement of the people on the deck. He reminded Hancock next to him. Now only his and Hancock's attacks will cause harm to these sea kings. Hancock glanced at Hayden. She didn't reply, and then responded with her actions. Immediately, Hancock's finger gently touched her red lips, and he pulled out an enlarged version of a pink love heart from his mouth. The love heart rose up like a hot air balloon in a short time, until the love heart was big enough to have a perfume snake. It stopped halfway through. Hayden also followed suit, and all the spiritual pressure on his body was transferred to his hands, and his hands were stretched toward the stern of the boat. For him now, as long as he can protect the ship, the work of opening the road is left to Hancock, and the attack power of her moves should be able to solve it. At this time, advertisement, all dozens of sea kings opened their mouths to swallow the ship's mouth, and collectively attacked the perfume snake. Boom. 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 Hayden built a total of 4 special defense walls on the stern, sides and top of the ship to envelop and protect the perfume snake. Hayden immediately made preparations. Except for the Neptune-like attack in the direction of the bow, the attacks from all directions were bombarded on the special defense wall in the air. The super-large prisoner's arrow was ejected by Hancock, and countless pink sharp arrows appeared in an instant. The intensity and ferocity of the attack were even more violent than a rainstorm. In an instant, the two moves were released at the same time. Hayden finished. It's over, it's over. Master Snakeheim must have a way. It's also because every Sea King doesn't want their kind to snatch the snacks in front of them. It can be said that they are scrambling to speed up. In order to reach the highest level of power in the following, he chanted the chant of Duankong. Hayden injected his spiritual pressure into the already difficult-to-release number 80 Ghost Road in a complicated way, making it play the effect of describing the chanting 4 times. Immediately afterwards, the Neptune attack has touched the top mast of the Perfume Serpent. Hancock then turned the attack of the super-large prisoner's arrow to the bow of the ship, which is the direction in which it has been advancing. Dozens of large Sea Kings suddenly rushed towards their ship, and the simple action of breaking the air even produced a great momentum. Then, read more at hotmtlnovel.zi. Chinese MTL fan fiction, second element novel can be read at hotmtl novel for free. Advertisement in the next second, the Neptune class is coming. The Pride of Heaven, the Iron Wall, the Dragon Walk, the Lion Roar, the Tiger Roar, the Wolf Rush, cut off the world before it collapses. As for the man standing next to Lord Snake G, his hands were empty and raised to the sky. They didn't understand what the man would do in the face of this situation. Get ready to open the way, I will block the attacks of these monsters. And Hayden's cut off at this time is naturally not the usual degree. In the past, he used this trick to abandon chanting, but it is different now. The non-joking look on his face made Hancock no doubt about this decision. At this moment, she strangely immediately believed the strange man. However, she now seems to have the only way. The result of adding dozens of heads is naturally even more terrifying. Tai Dao, break the air. This is a skill that can suddenly raise a special defense wall. The people on the deck had no other response to do at this moment, only to pin all their hopes on Lord Snake G, who was standing on the bow of the ship. Master Snake G. There was a roar. In an instant, they petrified the Sea Kings in the fan direction before their ship. At this moment, it is also the time for Hayden and Hancock to release their tricks. Prisoner's arrow. At this critical moment, Hayden simply told Hancock next to him. 81 of Bound Dao Duankong. For a while, the encirclement quickly closed, and they were about to be completely trapped. At the same time, their collective actions also caused big waves on the sea surface, and followed the Neptune class to fight the Perfume Snake. Chapter 157 Laughter Previous Chapter Next Chapter Advertisement. What? The people of the Hydra Pirates group on the ship were shocked immediately. The expected thing did not happen to them, and the eyes closed in fright did not feel anything happened after a second. They immediately opened their eyes and looked at the sky at this moment. Immediately afterwards, an incredible scene appeared in their eyes. It was as if the sky at this time had become solid, as if a few walls appeared to block all the attacks of the Sea Kings, but their eyes could not see the existence of the walls. In the sky in the line of sight, nothing appeared except for the squeezed body of the Neptune being blocked by something invisible. In this scene, it seemed that there was a patron saint silently protecting them. And Hancock, who used a captive arrow to open a passage, immediately realized after she stopped the attack, who created the scene in front of her. Hancock turned his eyes to Hayden next to him, and there was a hint of unexplained thought in her bright eyes. Sure enough, the charm of the concubine body is too dazzling. Now the critical situation seems to have improved a bit, and Hancock is starting to look like her before. Man, I didn't expect you to have this kind of ability, but I didn't expect it from my concubine. Hancock said to Hayden, who seemed to have stopped his moves now. However, after Hayden listened to the icy chill in her voice at this moment, he felt as if he didn't have the original level. Thinking of this, Hayden couldn't help but smile. Advertisement, reluctantly. Then he shrugged indifferently back to Hancock. Now the road ahead has been opened by Hancock, and attacks from other directions behind him are also blocked by Hayden's binding road. A beam of light from the gap in the front of the Sea King encirclement circle shone on the faces of everyone on board. Master Snake G. Master Snake G. Master Snake G. The people of the 9 Snake Pirates group cheered and screamed for their Lord Snake G. Although everyone didn't understand what happened just now, they just need to understand that they are now out of the crisis. Laughter, joy, mixed with tears of joy, filled the entire perfume snake at a time. Seeing the cheers of the men on the deck, the noble Boya Hancock, the emperor of the Amazon Lily Kingdom, couldn't help but show a warm smile on her face at this time, which was different from the icy cold on her face looked like. Hayden, who was standing next to her, just saw this smile that seemed to be rare in 1,000 years. Hayden was dumbfounded. Read more at hotmtlnovel.zi. He didn't expect that just an ordinary smile could instantly elevate the originally 100-point beautiful empress to a kind of terrible level. What to look at? Hancock noticed Hayden, who was about to run out of water at this moment, and she immediately said coldly to him, "Nothing." Hayden was immediately awakened by Hancock's voice, I'm watching. His eyes wandered and wanted to find an excuse in his mind. However, he didn't wait for him to find an excuse immediately. The next moment, the situation that seemed to be over suddenly changed dramatically. Click. Advertisement. A sound immediately irritated everyone's ears. The sound was like cracks in glass and other materials. Then, everyone on the deck saw it as if the sky above their heads had shattered, and dense cracks appeared immediately. Wrong. Later, someone realized that it was not the sky above their heads that shattered, but that something that had blocked the Sea King's attack from just now to the present was broken. Hey, you can't stop this thing! Hancock hurriedly yelled to Hayden. She also saw the situation in front of her at the moment. The skills released by this man were finally broken by the Sea Kings who were constantly attacking them. Hayden's words stuck in his throat. He has only this move that can reach the current strength of defensive skills, and the rest is either too weak or he hasn't learned it. It seems we have to kill all these Sea Kings. After a moment of silence, Hayden stared closely at the special defense wall that was about to be breached, and said to Hancock beside him. Hancock was speechless for a second. After listening to it, she had no other choice but to follow the man's meaning and went together. After that, she turned her gaze back to the direction everyone was looking at the moment, that is, the sky behind the ship, the direction from which the Sea Kings bombarded them. Then, wow! The four nearly transparent special defense walls finally shattered into large and small fragments under the continuous attack of the Sea Kings. However, it happened to be the attack of the Sea Kings, who did not follow the break of the defense wall and immediately attacked them. Advertisement. After they attacked and smashed the special defense wall, they were bounced back, and they couldn't open their mouths to their snacks immediately. At the same time, this also just gives the people on the boat some time to breathe and prepare. Shooting. Hancock's two sisters immediately commanded the crew to attack the Neptune. At this moment, they couldn't let Master Snake G carry the current situation alone. Even if their attacks don't seem to have any effect, they still want and must attack. With the jet black domineering arrow, it suddenly fell like a rain of arrows, shooting it from the deck at the huge body of the Sea King. Whoosh! The arrow rain engulfed the scream that was enough to make people in other parts of the world feel terrified, and gathered into a huge power. As their captain, Hancock will naturally not do nothing at this time. Tap his lips with the fingers of his right hand, and once again pull out a huge pink love heart. It's just that the love this time is twice as big as it was just now, and it is so big that if Hancock stood on a boat to attack, she would definitely be brought to her boat. So, Hancock leapt high with a pink love heart, jumped to the highest point of the perfume snake to stand. The love in his hand was immediately aimed at the sky in front, the direction where all the Sea Kings gathered at this moment. And Hayden, he certainly wouldn't let a group of women protect him. In an instant, Shirayuki pulled out his sleeve from the scabbard behind him, leaving Senbon Sakura on his back. Senbon Sakura's training level can't produce much effect on the exaggerated scene of his body shape. Standing on the deck of the bow, Hayden made no extra moves, but kicked the deck abruptly. His firm and powerful legs suddenly led him to the sky, and his figure rushed towards the sky behind the ship. Hayden's fuzzy figure passed by Hancock, and the gust of wind brought up Hancock's white robe and her fluttering black hair. Chapter 158 White Penalty. Previous chapter. Next chapter. Advertisement. This guy. Hancock temporarily gave up his attack on the Neptune, and pushed away the long hair that blocked his vision with his hand. How is this man going to attack? The clarity of vision made Hancock see clearly and realized which guy was passing by her just now. Although this man seems to be majoring in swordsmanship, and swordsmanship should rush forward and chop the enemy in the face of this situation. However, in the face of so many Sea Kings, this guy actually dared to rush to the Sea Kings in a dare to ignore life and death? Hancock didn't understand what Hayden was thinking at this time. Hayden did not explain, did not say a word. The real attacks of the Sea Kings are about to come, and at this moment, he can't tolerate him having extra time to do extra things. Hayden's figure instantly turned into a thin, fuzzy line in everyone's eyes. The speed of movement is so fast that in the feeling of everyone on board, it seems that in less than a second, it has reached almost half the height of this 100-meter-high Sea King class. 1 second later, Hayden's fast-moving body suddenly stopped and hovered in the air. At this time, all the hustle and bustle of the outside world disappeared in his world in an instant. And it's not just sound, but also color, smell, light. Hayden hovered on the route where the Neptunes were about to attack, slightly lowered his head, as if treating the dozens of terrifying Neptunes in front of him as harmless as air. The spiritual pressure on the body began to mobilize and flow, converging in the body into a silver-white rushing river, passing through every part of the body, and finally all gathered on the sleeve by Shuidao in his hand at this moment. In a blink of an eye. Advertisement even on the perfume snake under Hayden. Everyone suddenly felt at this moment that the man standing in the sky seemed to have some kind of change in an instant. It becomes more profound, and becomes even more elusive for them. And it becomes even more frightening to them. The atmosphere in the air at this moment is simply stronger than the feeling that they were forced to the ground before. Who is this guy? Hancock also felt this aura in this man. At this time, even she felt something was wrong. Then, Hayden's brewing was over. Swastika. Punishment in vain. Crashed. Hayden freed Shu Baishui's incomplete solution. Read more at hotmtlnovel.zi. The skyrocketing spiritual pressure caused a series of amazing changes in his body in the blink of an eye. A white halo immediately spread from his body, spreading in all directions like a wave of air just generated by an explosion. In addition, a dazzling, bright beam of light soared to the sky immediately surrounding him. For a moment, a cold white mist suddenly filled Hayden's surroundings. This appalling phenomenon not only shocked everyone on the perfume snakes below at this moment, but also shocked the Sea Kings who were about to attack him. The attack of the Neptune class was stopped abruptly by him. After a while, the phenomenon caused by the swastika also subsided. Just as everyone below felt that the temperature in the environment suddenly dropped to a freezing temperature, Hayden's figure, which was first covered by the beam of light, appeared. The black hair has been turned into white hair by the ice, and there are still some ice crystals on the hair, as if it is shining silver. Advertisement: the pupil of the right eye completely turned into crystal clear ice, and the clothes on the upper body were blown by the breeze, shattered into countless white fragments, flying in the sky. Although this swastika is an incomplete swastika, Hayden has spent a lot of time practicing this incomplete swastika since he first acquired this form. From the very beginning, only one arm formed the shape of the ice armor. At this moment, it has been possible to wrap the two arms and most of the upper body. Hayden wanted to be all wrapped up, but he could only do that now. If you don't count the second Zhanpakudao Senbon Sakura behind him, his current appearance is his strongest form. In order to protect the ship behind Hancock, Hayden tried his best. His food, his locomotive, and his women are all on the ship below, and he will never let these Sea Kings destroy them. The Neptune class did not continue to attack. This was a good time for him to attack. Hayden subconsciously looked in the direction of Hancock below, only to see Hancock still there. Hey! While he shouted at Hancock, he brought, "What are you doing?" Eyes looked at her. Hancock listened to the man's call in the sky. She lost her mind because of staring at the man's strong posture, and then recovered. Her eyes glared at Hayden. She didn't speak, and then she pulled up a huge love and shot a rain of pink arrows. Prisoner's arrow. By seeing the attack from her, Hayden still had to pay attention to avoiding it. Watch a little. Hayden turned abruptly, glanced at Hancock and shouted. After speaking, they rushed towards the Sea King like pink arrow rain, followed by the arrow rain together, and rushed up. Advertisement tweeted. Boom. Tweeted. The sound of an arrow breaking through the air was mixed with the airburst of Hayden's stepping. Hayden and Jianyu were about to rush to the front of the Neptune class. He immediately separated from Jianyu, avoiding the Neptune class attacked by the arrow rain, and rushed to the next Neptune class. Moment. Hayden headed straight towards the Sea King-like figure, suddenly turned around, kicked righteously with his foot on the Sea King-like face, and at the same time looked down at the part of the Sea King who was kicked by him. The huge force wrapped around the legs only touched for a second, and the body of this part of the Sea King type suddenly dented, as weak as a rag doll. Immediately afterwards, everyone on the surface of the sea saw in their eyes that the Sea King who was hit by this man, its huge body was suddenly kicked back by this man. This shocking scene immediately caused the crew of the Nine Snakes pirates to cover their mouths in shock. Now, on the top of the perfume snake, Hancock, who regarded herself as a turret, saw this man's move, and she was not outdone. After a cold snort, the speed of drawing the bow immediately became more violent, and the speed of the arrow release also made people unable to see the specific scene for a while. And Hayden in the sky just used the Sea King who was kicked by him as a cushion. Without a pause, he moved towards the next Neptune class who was attacking, and his right hand suddenly raised the blade of Shirayuki's sleeve. Instant time. A flying slash as low as -20 degrees suddenly appeared in this piece of sky. The white light emitted from flying slash seemed to be more dazzling than the light in the sky at this moment. Breaking through the air, the power seemed to freeze the space. Flying slashed straight to the ground, slashing the head of the Sea King in front of him without a pause, and then slashed towards the sky after breaking his body. Chapter 159 cleared previous chapter. Next chapter advertisement. Boom. Sword energy penetrated, slanting up into the sky. In just 2 seconds, Jian-Chi rushed into the clouds hanging high in the sky. Puff. Shouted. Finally, the sword energy that had no impact, collapsed in the clouds, and exploded in the clouds with an energy that was many times higher than that of ordinary cannonballs. The explosion aroused a huge momentum, and suddenly all the thick clouds in the sky were blown away. Now, the sky above the head within the encirclement of the Neptune group was suddenly cleaned up. Some light thoughts blocked by the clouds were also projected down immediately, projected in the vision that was blocked by the Neptune group and became a little dark. Hey, is this man's strength a bit too exaggerated? Did you not use your real strength when you played against Lord Snake G just now? Bravo. Everyone on the deck of the Nine Snakes Pirates group immediately couldn't help talking about it. Except for their Lord Snake G, they had never seen anyone with such power. Did this guy keep his hands when he was with me? Hancock continued to shoot the pink arrow while thinking inwardly. On the body of this man, Huo Ran felt the tremendous pressure that had not appeared before, and the strength of this guy was like a change of individual in the blink of an eye. However, shortly thereafter, what she thinks is not, with such a capable guy, the man in the boat under her will be okay, but instead, you guy just dared to keep your hands with your concubine. Advertisement. Her mood suddenly changed. However, she couldn't allow her to continue thinking about these unnecessary things at this time. The Sea King-like crisis did not drop sharply because of this man's sudden force. During this period of Hancock thinking, after Hayden's move in the sky above, he did not stop at all, and continued to slash towards the Sea Kings in other directions. However, even though Hayden's slash has killed some Sea Kings, at this time, the Sea Kings who surrounded them, in the feelings and eyes of everyone on the boat, did not seem to have noticed any obvious changes. What was the Neptune group that surrounded them at the beginning, except for the Neptune's body, whose head was decapitated, smashed into the sea with large swaths of water? What it was like before, now it is still what it was after a period of time. The spiritual pressure consumption of slashing out a huge slash was a bit beyond the development that Hayden had previously anticipated, and his breathing became a bit quicker for a while. Read more at hotmtlnovel.zi. Hayden didn't dare to stop an attack at this time, and rested for a few minutes. In the current crisis situation, even more than 10 seconds cannot be delayed. If a little negligence occurs, then the ship below will definitely be smashed into pieces immediately. A sturdy ship capable of carrying 100 people will be destroyed as if it were folded out of paper, and it will be destroyed into countless pieces without any effort. Hayden's figure has been dashing around in the sky, as if he didn't know how to stop, slicing out a slash that could cut a 100-meter-sized sea king. A heart-shaped arrow like Cupid's arrow, which is actually wrapped in a shocking petrification ability, and then the entire sky is covered. And this also increased the power of their offensive. The slow time passed bit by bit. At this moment, the crisis they are facing is only a matter of time before they are completely dealt with. Advertisement. Read more at hotmtlnovel.zi. Chinese MTL fan fiction, second element novel can be read at hotmtl novel for free. The temperature in the sky has dropped below zero at this time, which is completely different from the temperature in the sea area immediately outside this sea area, as if this place is a different space. Afterwards, this sea area no longer looked like the normal sea. So far. Sucky. Finally, the freezing of the white snow in the sleeves is used as a cooking method, and it is decorated with the slowly falling ice crystals in the sky. The sword aura radiating white light flooded the top of the 9 snakes and pirates in an instant. After experiencing this intense consumption, the hunger in his heart naturally became more intense. Hayden waved his sleeve Baishui and cut off the last Sea King in his sight at the moment. He stood high in the sky and said breathlessly, "Hayden and Hancock." The Neptune group surrounding the perfumed snake was all joined by Hayden and Hancock, together with the people of the 9 snakes and pirates, to clear the Neptune group together. The surrounding sea is floating with the remains of the dead Neptune species. Even after the Neptune species are cut and killed by Hayden, their remaining bodies are still huge. Above this sea area, there are like small islands suddenly rising up. Then Hayden, his keen eyes noticed this situation, before his figure rushed towards this Sea King, which was part of the petrification. His slash had already slashed this Sea King. Good to make an attacking head. On the red-stained sea, the remnants of the Neptune species looked more like a big pot of tomato seafood soup in the eyes of Hayden above. Now there are only 2 or 3 kittens left, and these are also Hayden and Hancock. They have not yet attacked the remaining Sea Kings. He doesn't forbid his hands to cover his belly. "I will make you full right away," he said comfortingly to his belly. Advertisement. Use the sea as the basin and the sea as the base soup. Add special tomato sauce from the Sea King class, and then add large pieces of meat. What Hancock is doing now is basically the same, regardless of his own physical strength, as if he has unlimited ammunition, and the pink arrow is launched in a 360-degree rotation. Now, under the condition of having a common enemy, Hancock, she should also let me eat the whole thing. The two have a tacit understanding and coordination. At last, Hancock's arrow rain hit the lower part of a Neptune, petrifying an entire area in an instant, and temporarily stiffening the movement of the Neptune. The floating crystal ice crystals, like countless tiny diamonds, dot the world at this moment. In the defense and attack of all of them, the group of Sea Kings that surrounded them has finally changed significantly at this moment. Hayden standing in the sky, he looked hungry. It was to beg for stuttering before he boarded Hancock's boat below. At this moment, the deflated belly made a sound of earth-shaking. Hayden looked down at his belly. His belly had been retracted and could not be retracted anymore, and his muscles were so hungry that they were wrinkled together. The calm blue sea under the ship was now blood-red by a large amount of blood gushing from the Neptune group. It is not an exaggeration to say that they can't see the original color of the sea for several kilometers. Hayden thought of it beautifully in his heart, and then went down towards the perfumed snake number below. The Sea King group that kept them tightly guarded and barely saw the surrounding light was basically cleared by the attacks of Hayden and Hancock. But, at this moment, the two of them attacked as if they had started to practice cooperation very early, and their attacks were harmonious and tacit. Chapter 160 Full meal. Previous chapter. Next chapter. Advertisement. The sky is clear, the clouds are scattered. The sky is high at the moment. The clouds above the head here were all broken up by Hayden's slash, presenting a clean scenery. The horizon in everyone's eyes was suddenly bright at this time. Hayden's figure falling towards the bottom almost instantly reached Hancock, who was standing on the highest point of the top of the ship, and he hovered in the air beside him. Not bad. He smiled and complimented Hancock for his performance. In the process of beheading the Sea Kings just now, Hancock's arrows have been cooperating with him. If there is an accidental attack that he did not notice, then Hancock's arrows will definitely hit the Sea Kings. Hayden didn't expect Hancock to cooperate so well. Hancock looked at the man's appearance at this time. Hayden hadn't lifted the state of swastika, and the oppressive feeling on his body naturally entangled him. She could feel the deterrence that this man brought to her when she was far away, but now that this man is approaching Hancock, and she can feel the inexplicable aura of this man even more. However, Hancock remained calm. No matter what you do, your concubine is the most beautiful. Her slender hand gently teased the black hair beside her ears, and then slightly raised her head to look at Hayden, returning to the state it was in when she first met him, and said coldly, "Hancock's situation has gone through the violent consumption just now. At this time her state does not seem to have reduced physical strength due to excessive release of abilities. Except for the indescribable slight ups and downs of the chest, there is no physical phenomenon on the body." Hayden was a little surprised by what Hancock looked like now. But if you think about it carefully, as the only woman in the Sea of Kiwu, she is even more known as the world's first beauty. If her strength cannot surpass the monsters in the monsters, then naturally she will not be able to walk the originals that point. Okay. Hayden didn't want to continue chatting at this time. Then, My Majesty the Queen, can you give some reward to the warriors who fought alongside you? Advertisement. After Hayden paid the gentleman's salute seriously, he spoke slowly and gently. From the contact during this period of time, he felt that Hancock should be more likely to follow the set he presents now. Hancock was shocked, a little surprised by the man's sudden change of attitude. Why does this guy seem to be a different person again? And respect her? The thoughts in Hancock's heart immediately appeared on her face. Although her face was puzzled, she didn't think anymore. Now this man's attitude towards her makes her feel happy. Every man, without exception, will fall under the beauty of his concubine. Hancock's heart activity was extremely rich, but his face showed no trace. She raised her head slightly, and then used her eyes to signal Dao Hayden to follow her. Hayden watched Hancock's gesture, and he immediately realized that this was for him to follow. Then Hayden followed Hancock to the deck. At this time, read more at hotmtlnovel.zi. The people on the deck looked at Lord Snake G and the man who saved their lives together, and they immediately cheered like waves and expressed their excitement towards them. The cheers and screams spread far away at this moment, and even rushed into the sky in one breath. Under the excitement of all of them, the whole ship seemed to follow them, and the hull shook with excitement along with them. It seems that this ship has a life, and I am also grateful to Hancock and Hayden for saving its life. Hancock, who stood in front of the crowd, did not speak for the first time, so that her men could vent out at this moment and release the fear that had been accumulated in their hearts from the previous situation. Hayden stood beside Hancock, and he also didn't speak. After a while, the people who had finished venting also turned their eyes to Lord Snake G in front, and their piercing eyes awaited Lord Snake G's next order to them. Hancock didn't ask much about the reward the man needed. Advertisement. The strange request that the man asked for food before was equally strangely remembered by her, and it was not just this. His groaning stomach now indicates what he needs. Prepare food for the concubine, Hancock said lightly to everyone under him. Yes. The crew of the 9 snakes and pirates immediately responded with excitement. Then, as soon as he blurted out, he knew he was a fool. Hancock shook his head quickly when the man didn't pay attention to her, trying to get rid of the nausea in his heart. At this time, among the ordinary crew members sitting around Hayden and Hancock, one of them wondered what the man's name was. This naive voice made Hayden stop the action of stuffing food, and he quickly swallowed the food that filled his mouth. Gummy. He swallowed directly into his stomach. He wrapped the food in his mouth and praised sincerely. With so many delicacies in front of him, his thoughts were not placed on Hancock next to him. He just asked politely. Words fall. This moment, Hayden was sitting next to Hancock, and his slight excitement made Hancock suddenly feel a little cute at this time. Delicious. Hash. He was so hungry that he rubbed his hands with excitement. His face couldn't help but a smile from his heart filled his face. As Hayden waited to see through his eyes, he suddenly smelled a strange fragrance in his nose. His mind suddenly became alive, and his brow raised. The sound of porcelain collision sounded. Read more at hotmtlnovel.zi. Chinese MTL fan fiction, second element novel can be read at hotmtl novel for free. He held up a plate about 50 or 60 centimeters in diameter in front of him. On the plate was a kind of noodle similar to pasta and cheese, plus a piece of Neptune meat that was satisfying. She thought about it again, and suddenly felt a feeling of nausea coming to her. Advertisement. Do you want to eat? The sound immediately frightened Hancock, and she came back suddenly. Don't eat, she said. Hayden shrugged indifferently. Then I'll start. Are you asking me? Hayden asked this question with a puzzled expression. Wrong. Ding ling dang kang. You can call me Hayden. Then, after a while, not only is it because he can have a full meal right away, but also because the pile of special delicacies before him are all things he hasn't seen before. The rest of the people looked at the man praising their special delicacies, and they all showed proud smiles on their faces. Hancock sat next to him, and within a dozen seconds, she was exaggerated by the man, which aroused the gluttony in her stomach. She forcibly suppressed the feeling of wanting to eat. She also didn't timidly ask directly toward the surviving Hayden. Hey, what's your name? Then only heard Hayden's voice suddenly resounded. Hayden looked a little embarrassed, but then pretended that nothing happened and told them everyone's names. Hayden saw that someone pushed open the door of the cabin, and one after another, they brought out a large plate of delicacies. Hayden inhaled the food on the plate like a storm. Then he looked in the direction where the fragrance was wafting out, which was the front door of the cabin on the deck. The scent wafted from there, he was quite sure. Hancock didn't feel much excitement. She was accustomed to the special delicacies of their Amazon lily kingdom. Hancock's thoughts in her heart quickly braked. Why does she think this smelly man is cute? Immediately afterwards, I'm coming. Chapter 161. Go away? Previous chapter. Next chapter. Advertisement. Hayden. Listening to the name coming out of the strange man's mouth, everyone on the boat subconsciously recited it in their hearts. Hancock, who was sitting next to Hayden, also recited Hayden's name silently in her heart at this time. It's a strange name, but it feels a bit nice, and many more. How could my concubine find such a strange name so nice? The thoughts in Hancock's heart suddenly separated into two people, and the emotional situation in his heart suddenly became complicated. Her two younger sisters, who were behind Hancock, lived with their older sisters since they were young. At this time, they noticed the subtle changes in her older sisters. There is something wrong with my sister. The brows of Sonda, Sonia and Mary Groud frowned, and their eyes fixed on Hancock's back, trying to find out what caused this change. Then, the sound of Hayden's constant eating interrupted their thinking. Before the two of them could find the answer that caused the change, the answer seemed to be delivered by themselves. Sundar, Sonia and Mary Grud looked at each other suddenly. They both understood the meaning revealed in each other's eyes at the moment, and their meanings were still the same. This man? When such a question popped up in their minds, they immediately felt a little funny. Impossible, impossible, absolutely impossible. Sundar, Sonia and Mary Grud shook their heads from side to side, trying to get this ridiculous guess out of their heads. Advertisement. The two younger sisters are big figures, and the violent shaking movement naturally caused Hancock's reaction in front of them. Hancock immediately looked back at her two sisters, and saw that they were shaking their heads violently. She immediately felt strange. With his eyes widened, Sonda, Sonia and Mary Grud both noticed. Seeing the older sister suddenly looked back at them, the two of them immediately stopped shaking their heads. However, they didn't dare to tell your sister the reason why they made the action, so they had to raise a big smile and watch the sister laugh, without speaking. A trace of puzzlement flashed across Hancock's face, but he didn't bother about it anymore, then looked back at Hayden eating. Gudong. Hancock, who looked at Hayden again, forcibly controlled himself and suppressed the movement of swallowing saliva. How does this guy eat so delicious? On the surface, Hancock maintained an arrogant expression, but he was already roaring inside. Earlier this guy asked her if she could eat, and he said that she would not eat. If I go to eat at this time, will it be a bit? Hancock's mood was very tangled at this time, and his vision was a little blurred. However, the next second immediately followed. Read more at hotmtlnovel.zi. Oh. Hayden patted his round belly contentedly at this time and said. Hearing Hayden's movement, Hancock immediately came back to his senses. At this time, Hayden cleaned up all the food in his sight. Okay, now I don't need her to continue struggling. Hancock's expressionless face flashed through a trace of ferociousness, and instantly returned to his cold expression. This guy. In order to maintain her majesty, Hancock had to bite his teeth tightly in his heart at this moment. Advertisement at this time. Hayden, who had eaten and drank enough and solved the most important crisis, planned to leave at this time. After all, he hasn't forgotten the most important thing about his arrival in the windless zone, and that is the domineering practice. Well, thank you very much for your hospitality. Although there were some unpleasant things at the beginning, the final result is still good. Even if his Reiki perception is not so far away, he can still feel such an aura that is so huge that he feels terrifying inexplicably. The sudden arousal felt as if someone was ringing a gong directly in his brain. At this time, this large area may be a few kilometers or tens of kilometers in diameter. In this huge scene, the reaction caused in this windless zone is by no means calm and quiet, as if the bloody breath that is so strong that it soars to the sky does not exist. The feeling that only Hayden could perceive suddenly exploded in his mind. Although he thought he seemed to have a relationship with Hancock, he didn't want to ask them to teach him domineering. She thought this in her heart. Her face didn't show up, she was still expressionless. The bloody ocean filled with blood will definitely attract not only the Sea Kings who have not come here, but also the Sea Kings from far away. Hayden stood up after eating and drinking, and then saw the eyes of the people in the 9 Snake Pirates group one by one. It was time to leave. No. Next moment. The perfume snake they were riding on finally sailed away from this bloody ocean, completely out of this battlefield. This windless situation is still very strange to him, and the situation in this world is also very strange to him. Hancock beside him was not excited. Advertisement. Such a kind of scene, just imagined in your mind, can be like experiencing a scene of fear in person. This is more than that. Hayden smiled and said goodbye. The people of the 9 Snakes and Pirates also immediately responded to his wave, smiling and waving at Hayden, who is considered their lifesaver. There is no sign of any creatures surviving, and in Hayden's eyes, there is very silence. Moreover, he is a navy and stays on a pirate ship for too long, which is prone to problems. Immediately afterwards, an unprecedented sense of threat suddenly appeared in the distance of his place. Give your concubine a hurry. However, following the smell of Neptune species, they will not pay attention to what these small shrimps are on the road. All the way is like a violent machine, crushing anything blocking their path until they come to the place where the smell is emitted. Well, goodbye. The battlefield that had just ended soon, the waves were quiet, and there was no cloud. At this moment, he did not expect that a greater crisis was rushing towards them. Similarly, it is impossible for him to imagine the situation he is about to face. He turned his gaze to the rear at the moment, which was the bloody direction behind their ship. Hayden's mind was stunned in an instant. The action of preparing to take a step froze immediately, and his face sank. Read more at hotmtlnovel.zi. Chinese MTL fan fiction, second element novel can be read at hotmtl novel for free. It's not that there is a shielding atmosphere such as sea tower stones, or that the 2 giant snakes on the bow of the perfume snake can deter some sea kings. These 2 ways of walking through the windless zone can solve it. The Sea Kings in the windless zone are cruel, violent, large, and very sensitive to blood. Hayden said the last words to them, and he was going to leave directly. Chapter 162 Twists and Turns Previous chapter Next chapter. Advertisement. It seems I can't go. Hayden muttered to himself, staring at the sea in the direction of the bloody ocean at this moment. Although he was talking to himself very quietly, Hancock, who was standing close to him, heard it clearly. What do you mean by being unable to leave? Hancock immediately spoke out in doubt. With this guy on her boat, her mood will become very bad, and she wants to get this guy off the boat as soon as possible. Now when I heard that this guy didn't plan to leave, what does he mean? At this moment, Hayden's expression, the smile that had just appeared on his face, dimmed in an instant. He didn't make any mistakes about this dangerous feeling once. And since there was nothing wrong, then there will be more fierce guys attacking them than the Aquaman group that they solved just now. Maybe the same group of guys rushing over is not necessarily. Hayden couldn't be sure of the vague breath he felt. At the same time, he couldn't imagine that there were any more terrifying creatures in this windless zone. If you compare the Neptune group that surrounded them with the strength that he has only observed from a distance, there is no comparability between the two, and it is not a level at all. Hayden wanted to keep this nervous breath only on him, not necessarily spreading to other people on the ship. However, he has not been able to control his emotions well. The trace of anxiety that came out of his eyes was immediately seen by Hancock, who was closest to him. Why is this guy's mood suddenly wrong again? Although Hancock saw a trace of his anxiety, she didn't understand what it meant. Advertisement. Hayden took a deep breath, turned his gaze to Hancock's eyes, and looked straight ahead. Now there is a bad news to tell you, and there is likely to be worse than just now. His voice was very serious at this moment. What? Hancock looked at this look that didn't seem to be joking. She asked immediately. Hayden couldn't give her an answer right now. He just had a vague feeling, and he himself didn't know what would happen in the specific situation. I don't know yet. However, I need you to speed up the boat. The farther you go from this place, the better, he told Hancock in a serious tone. Looking at Lord Snake G and Hayden, the mood of the two of them suddenly changed upside down. The atmosphere was pleasant just now, and in a blink of an eye it became the solemn atmosphere it is now. Everyone couldn't help holding their breath, not daring to disturb the two people in front of them. After Hancock heard Hayden's words, she was silent for a second. This man is full of mystery. After this period of contact, she doesn't think this man will make any nasty jokes at this time. Read more at hotmtlnovel.zi. Then only things that are really worse than just now will happen. Get ready. Set sail now. Hancock's face was cold, and her voice was as cold as ice. Yes. Everyone sitting on the deck immediately responded loudly and stood up at the same time. They responded to this sudden command almost in the blink of an eye. There is no doubt, no hesitation, as long as Master Snake G's command is sounded, he will immediately respond. The people of the 9 snakes and pirates immediately returned to their respective jobs on board. At this time, Hancock's slender thighs slammed and jumped directly to the head of the giant snake on the bow, and immediately gave the 2 giant snakes under him the command to advance at the highest speed. Advertisement. Hayden also took off at the same time and jumped to the highest mast, looking at the bloody ocean behind the ship, trying to see if there was any movement in the distance. At this time, a strange state of silence appeared on the ship again. The Sea Kings in the surrounding waters have been cleaned up by Hayden and Hancock. Now in this windless zone, there is no sign of biological activity. There are no birds in the sky, and ordinary fish in the sea have long since disappeared. Above this endless sea, only the pirate ship of the 9 Snakes pirates sailed alone on it. After a period of silence, standing on the top of the mast, Hayden felt the crisis approaching. However, standing at the top, he did not notice the direction of the crisis he perceives, and something strange was coming. Don't think about the feeling in his mind that is warning him. If he just looks at it with his eyes, he won't think that something bad is about to happen now. Then something appeared in Hayden's sight. A cloud of things suddenly rose from the sea level. And that thing, Hayden had never seen it before. It is blurred and the speed of travel is very fast, and, looking at the range that rises above the sea level, the size of the thing must be very large. What he meant was that the kind that is very big, so big that it is estimated to be bigger than an ordinary island. Hayden couldn't help squinting his eyes, and concentrated his gaze to look into the distance. As time passed, what was rising from the sea level became clearer and clearer until it showed its true appearance. Tsunami. Without Hayden yelling, everyone on the deck below him already screamed for him. Tsunami. Advertisement. Tsunami. The ordinary crew members of the 9 Snakes and pirates suddenly screamed. In this windless and rainless climate, a tsunami of 200 to 300 meters high was somehow stirred up. The evil waves are overwhelming, and the sun is overshadowed by the sky. The distant sea roared and surging in their direction, and the big waves set off directly covered half a day. This natural hazard is different from other controllable conditions. If it is a Sea King attack, Hancock can also kill the Sea King directly. If it was an attack by a pirate group, Hancock would be more able to kill them directly. However, if it is a tsunami, as those with devil fruit ability, those with ability are able to fight against the power of this nature. In the same way, there are also things that cannot. Hancock was the one who couldn't. Not only is her fruit ability not dominant in this situation, her strength has not yet reached the level of being able to fight against nature. Everyone in the 9 snakes and pirates can also understand that although Lord Snake G's strength is strong, they also know that strength has a certain limit. The limit is that in the face of the current tsunami situation, they can only avoid the tsunami as much as possible, and then give their lives to heaven, hoping that they will not be swallowed up by the tsunami. At this time the huge wave of the tsunami is approaching. Hancock and Hayden are standing on the stern deck at the moment, looking at the tsunami. She didn't expect that this time she would come out for the first time, and it would be like this. The first 2 times she was very sure that they would have no problems. And at this moment, Hancock was silent and couldn't be sure. Chapter 163 Frozen Flash Previous Chapter Next Chapter. Advertisement Suddenly. The strange change suddenly appeared again. In the big wave of 100 meters, something seemed to be swimming back and forth inside, in groups, and at the same time it seemed to be huge. Seeing this slightly strange picture in Hayden's focused gaze, Hancock, who also stood next to him, also noticed this. "What is that?" Hancock asked subconsciously after seeing it. She hadn't seen this scene before, living in a windless zone. "I don't know, but it's definitely not a good thing," Hayden replied casually. His mind was spinning rapidly, he just wanted to find a way to solve the real crisis now. "Grandma's, what happened to this tsunami?" The emotions in Hayden's heart were very irritable, and his brows were almost frowning. The tsunami that screamed, at this time its own speed has reached the point of horror. As for Hayden and Hancock, they can now thoroughly see the contents of the tsunami. That is a group of sea kings, and the appearance of each head is basically the same, which is a strange group of sea kings, constantly rolling in the huge waves. At this moment, they have stirred the Red Sea water in the blood-colored ocean into the huge waves. This turbulent tsunami was mixed with a trace of blood red, blue, white and red. Had it not been for the tsunami that was sweeping toward him at this moment, Hayden would definitely praise this rare wonder in the world. F*K. Advertisement. Hayden cursed secretly. It now seems that he is the only one who can deal with the current crisis. He doesn't know if his ability can do it, but how can a man say no? Now the tsunami has not rushed to them. If I face the tsunami directly and block the tsunami now, even if I can't stop the huge tsunami in the end, I should be able to buy time for Hancock and the others. After thinking about it quickly, Hayden decided on this approach. Now, under the violent speed of the tsunami, all considerations or actions must be fast. Decide in an instant, act in an instant, and you can't miss the best time. Realizing that this is the chance for Hancock and the others to escape here, Hayden hurriedly said to Hancock, "Hurry up and take your people out of here. I will block the rest." And many more. Hancock listened to Hayden's meaning. He was planning to sacrifice himself to gain time to escape for them? Even if Hancock didn't fully understand Hayden's strength at the moment, she didn't think that after Hayden went to block the tsunami, she would have any time to escape from the tsunami. At this moment, all the disguise on her body faded with the depression. Read more at hotmtlnovel.zi. She didn't know how this man who only knew her for such a short time would be willing to sacrifice his life for her. Hancock's words whirled back and forth in his throat, what he wanted to say, but he didn't know what to say, and couldn't say it. Hayden looked at her sensational appearance, and he laughed out loud. He probably knew what caused Hancock to look like this. Hey, why are your eyes still shining?" He pointed at Hancock's eyes and said with a smile. Hancock wiped his eyes quickly, and then listened to Hayden continuing. "Did you forget that I could fly? After that, when I block the tsunami and you leave this sea, I can fly away." Hancock was stunned. The expression on his face instantly froze. After a while, she began to understand what Hayden had just said to her. Advertisement. It turned out to be like this. After understanding this, the feeling of life and death in Hancock's heart disappeared. But she then changed her mind and thought that since this guy can leave directly, she still stayed on the boat to help them. Hancock felt that she should just ignore what this guy was playing with her just now. The beam of light had already frozen the part of the tsunami that Hayden was facing in front of him. Afterwards, Hayden said goodbye to Hancock. The violent wind engulfed by the tsunami had already arrived first, and the cold white mist that had enveloped him was instantly blown away, revealing his half-sworn form. The trend of freezing on the huge waves is like going wild, expanding instantly. One person, one knife, facing the power from nature, a roaring huge wave 100 meters high. Hayden, who was almost exhausted, showed a relieved smile on his pale face. Less than 5 seconds. While speaking, Hayden pulled out the sleeve baishui that was inserted back into his back. "Gift," Hancock murmured, and then when she wanted to say something to Hayden, Hayden's figure had already jumped high, and directly greeted him in the direction of the huge wave. Hancock's words had already reached her lips. Looking at the back of Hayden leaving, she had no choice but to swallow the words from her lips, not knowing what she was thinking in her heart. After the violent release of the ice armor on Hayden's upper body, now only the ice collar is left. Hayden liberated Shu Baishui again. Hayden was not bothered by the violent wind, and he was very calm in the state of Wan Jia. "What?" Hayden pointed the tip of the sleeve white snow knife to the circle in front of him, continuously providing huge spiritual pressure. Read more at hotmtlnovel.zi. Chinese MTL fan fiction, second element novel can be read at Hot MTL Novel for free. Hayden murmured. Advertisement. Suddenly, after being destroyed by Hayden, the monstrous huge wave was solved perfectly. In Hayden's eyes, the beam of light touched the point of the tsunami and immediately froze a large area. What followed was the peculiar sound of freezing ice formation. At this moment, the spiritual pressure gathered on this move was already huge enough, and the tsunami ahead was about to directly slap Hayden. The white circle in front of him immediately looked like a laser beam, shooting straight at the tsunami ahead. Then Hayden stood in midair at a height almost half the height of the huge wave. Listening to the roar of the tsunami in his ears, Hayden released the frozen flash that he could only emit with almost all his spiritual pressure. Baishui, who was holding the sleeve, immediately faced the void of the huge wave in front of him, seeming to draw a white circle slowly, but the formation of the circle was only a momentary matter. Punishment in vain. Using the white circle in the void in front of him as the channel for the release of spiritual pressure, Hayden suddenly mobilized the spiritual pressure from all over his body and poured it all into the circle at this moment. However, this crisis is finally resolved. In just the blink of an eye, the frozen beam of light has shot into the tsunami ahead. "We should meet again soon, and I will give you a present next time we come." Swastika. After being frozen, the huge waves on both sides were originally huge waves combined into a whole. After the middle part was lost, the Neptune group in the huge waves immediately lost the motivation to attack. Then, the hollow white circle was gradually filled with some kind of dazzling light, until it became a circular light spot that released a cold breath of tens of degrees below zero. Seeing that the tsunami had been put out by him, he hurriedly stopped and released the move. Well, Chapter 164 Me Hayden Previous Chapter Next Chapter. Advertisement at this moment. Because of the origin of the energy bar at the beginning, this chain reaction finally came to an end. At this time, Hayden no longer has any strength to do anything else. He just wants to find a place to sleep well, and after falling asleep, he sleeps until he wakes up naturally. However, the tsunami was extinguished by him. But now, he was standing stupidly in the sky on this windless and vast sea, and there was no island in his sight for him to settle on. In addition to seawater, it is seawater. Bye. Hayden even spoke a little weakly now, and put Shirayuki's sleeves back into the scabbard on his back. After moving his aching limbs, he was going to ride his red silver horse to find an uninhabited island. Okay, at this time, Hayden suddenly found something wrong. Where's my motorcycle? He was so dumbfounded that he shouted immediately. However, after a second he realized in his mind that he did not see the whereabouts of the motorcycle. It seems. Should have landed on Hancock's boat, right? Thinking of this, his expression is a bit ugly, and his 5 senses are tangled together. With a faint hope, Hayden looked around the surrounding waters, hoping to see Hancock and his boat. However, Hancock's ship had already gone. Advertisement. Forget it, anyway, I should be able to meet again soon, and I'll get it back then. So far, Hayden had no choice but to think like this in his heart. However, he still has a problem to solve now. At this time, he couldn't clearly recognize the direction in the vast ocean. The things he navigated were all installed on the red silver horse. And he was apparenting to the original world geography and the like, not to mention the strange One Piece world now. It's okay if there is a map navigation and the like, but now, he has nothing on him except for 2 Zhanpakudao knives and a naval emergency phone worm. Looking around at the almost blue sea, Hayden was completely blinded. Looking at the less glaring sun above his head, Hayden decided to move in the direction of the sun. I used to watch survival shows and so on. It seemed to talk about getting lost and looking at the sun to identify the direction. Hayden remembered this survival technique, but he had forgotten what to do with the specific details, so he just remembered to watch the sun. However, after thinking about it, the skills of the original world seem to be inferior to the current world, right? It should be. Read more at hotmtlnovel.zi. Hayden stepped on the air in the sky and kept moving in the direction of the sun at the same time, thinking in a mess in my mind, killing time. Fortunately, less than a while passed. On the sea horizon in Hayden's eyes, there appeared a small island with almost the same shape. Boom! His steps in the air suddenly accelerated, and Hayden's figure flickered in the sky. A few minutes later, the appearance of the small island in the line of sight became clear. Hayden's figure has not yet reached the island, but his spiritual pressure has already reached the island, scanning the general situation of the island in 2 or 3 seconds. There are no big beasts, only animals that do not pose a threat to him are on that island. For Hayden, the perfect vacation and repair island appeared. Advertisement: is there any beast that can threaten him, and a group of ingredients that provide him with meat are on the island. The fatigue in the body urged Hayden to speed up his actions, and he immediately increased his speed a little bit after he stepped on the air. Then Hayden's feet finally landed on the dirt surface of the island. After the caller of the phone worm did not continue to speak, Hayden immediately replied, "Oh, good, well understood. The rest is gone." Vertical Sun, the caller immediately informed the Major General at the end of the phone bug. Hayden immediately said, Hey, this is Rear Admiral of the Navy Headquarters, Rear Admiral Hayden. I'm on an uninhabited island in the windless zone, and I need a warship to pick it up. Understood, Major General Hayden. Your request has been reported to the above, and someone will soon respond. Hayden fell into a deep sleep without even realizing it. Blue. Hayden's face was blank, but he wasn't someone who would care about these things. Hayden's identity information was quickly confirmed, and the confirmation was correct. Regarding the windless zone, I also learned from the report why the Major General went to the windless zone. Looking at the direction of the little animal that was startled after he woke up, Hayden, who was still a little awake, wiped the sticky saliva on his face. After 5 minutes of consideration, Hayden decided what he would do next. Haha. The voice of the phone worm was hung up from that section. The person on the other side of the phone bug was immediately stunned. Inside the windlass belt? A tiny phone worm was placed in the palm of his left hand, and his right hand picked up the microphone and started dialing. Snoring, advertisement, Hayden, who hadn't stepped on the ground for a long time, would suddenly make him step on the dirt. However, he did not resist either, and his body slowly collapsed on the muddy ground. After a moment of silence. Read more at hotmtlnovel.zi. Chinese MTL fan fiction, second element novel can be read at hotmtl novel for free. The feeling of full body vitality after waking up made him feel very comfortable. Then, he began to recall a series of things that happened yesterday. Hayden realized that his limbs suddenly softened at this time, and gradually couldn't support his normal state of standing. However, because this call line was an internal call line in their navy, he immediately reported the situation to the superior next to him, and at the same time checked the identity of the Major General Hayden. Just stepping on the muddy ground, very ordinary, this inconspicuous little thing can make him feel very happy and satisfied, immediately afterwards. After careful consideration, Hayden immediately took out the emergency phone worm he was guarding carefully. Oh, it still feels comfortable. Hayden didn't care. The phone bug was then carefully put away again, and then stood up and looked at the surrounding environment. He was about to start making himself some breakfast to eat. The telephone operator paused for a while before he continued. Excuse me, do I need any other help? At noon. Hayden was licked awake by a strange little animal whose name was unknown. First of all, although a little unwilling, his domineering practice needs to be temporarily suspended. There is nothing on him. He needs the Navy to come and meet him in the windlass belt. Second, It happened to go back to the Navy headquarters, and proposed to the upper party that Hancock should be invited to become the king of Kiwahai. In this way, there is basically no need to worry about what the Navy will do to the Hancock pirates. Gajia. Okay, that's it. Hayden doesn't care whether it is dirty or not, nor is he afraid of other animals' sudden attacks when he is drowsy. He is going to sleep right away. What's the matter? Chapter 165. Back to headquarters temporarily. Previous chapter. Next chapter. Advertisement. After that, Hayden waited for a few days on this uninhabited island, and then returned from the windless zone to the headquarters of the Navy when the warship was picked up. It took about a week to go back and forth, and Hayden finally returned to the Navy headquarters under the response of the warship. The operation of the Navy headquarters is not different from the past. The Navy at Crescent Harbor is still so crowded, a hustle and bustle scene. After the warship that received Hayden stopped steadily, Hayden Xiang made a detour for him to enter the windless zone. After taking him with the Lieutenant General to express his gratitude, he immediately disembarked. Hayden paced toward the naval fortress, and he was going to directly propose to him that he would invite Hancock to be the king of Kiwahai. Go through the port, through the huge square in front of the fortress. Hayden walked casually while thinking about things in his heart. That's right, this is where I want to make suggestions to the official general, or to the current Marshal Sora. The pictures of these big men flashed in Hayden's mind. This kind of big thing about the King Kiwahai should be to find the most powerful marshal of the Navy to report the situation. Thinking of this, Hayden determined which boss's office he would go to when he entered the fortress. However, Hayden immediately remembered another question. He is not very familiar with the relationship between Mr. Kong and Mr. Kong. Advertisement. Hayden frowned, but he thought about it again, and just bite the bullet. At this time, he turned his attention back to the world in front of him. The appearance of the Navy headquarters has not changed. However, even though he was walking with his head down thinking about things as soon as he got off the warship, he still had a part of his attention on the surrounding environment. He noticed a strange phenomenon since he got off the ship, and now he was about to walk to the gate of the Navy fortress, and the phenomenon that made him feel a little strange also appeared here. From the port to the gate of the current fortress, on such a long road, from time to time there are second-class and third-class Marines gathered in a circle. Hayden glanced at the seamen casually and noticed that their faces seemed to be filled with pink smiles. He was suddenly disgusted by the expressions on these people's faces. What are these guys looking at? The curious Hayden stopped in front of the fortress gate, and then walked towards the pile of people closest to him. What are you doing? Hayden's voice rang behind them all. However, his voice was not enough to make the group of sea soldiers who were fascinated by the sights turn their heads. Someone smiled and said casually in a strange tone, "Don't you know, recently, a beautiful pirate was offered a reward of 80 million Baileys when she debuted. Read more at hotmtlnovel.zi. Another person answered. This newspaper also calls this female pirate the world's #1 beauty. Hayden nodded thoughtfully. How did he sound familiar? He immediately thought in his heart, and at the same time he probably knew who the female pirate was referring to. This seems to be talking about Hancock. However, he hadn't seen any report about Hancock before going to the windless zone. He has only been separated from Hancock for a week or so now. Why did they get involved so quickly? Hayden was a little puzzled. Advertisement. However, he didn't think about it anymore, and then went inside the naval fortress. After some time passed, Hai boarded the office at the top of this huge naval fortress, which was naturally the place where the Marshal of the Navy and Marshal of the Sky. However, he is just a Major General. Although he has received some special treatment within the Navy because of his superhuman potential, it is not easy to see the Admiral if you want to meet. Hayden stood waiting outside Marshal Kwong's office, waiting for the Marines who had entered to give orders to come out and tell him that he could go in. Empty Marshal's office. He really didn't seem to be here once after thinking about it. In the past, the most was to go to Teacher ZFA's office, or to go to the office of the General of the Warring States. Just as he was thinking about it, the seaman who sent the order came out of the room. Major General Hayden, you can go in now. After speaking, he nodded to Hayden and returned to his previous post. Hayden didn't speak, and nodded to express his understanding. Then he opened the sliding door in front of him and walked in. At this time, Marshal Kong was sitting on a chair with his chest and looking at Hayden, who came in. He was curious why this kid came to him today. Hayden came in, but he was slightly frightened by Marshal Sora's current appearance. He was so strong that he was almost like a mountain, and stared at him with his chest tightly on his face without expression. In Hayden's perception of aura, Marshal Sora did not have that exaggerated aura. However, he understands that these superficial things are just cover-ups by the bigwigs. It's not that Hayden was a little bit scared, but that he really understood these powerhouses who dominated the sea. He understood some of the revealed strength. The time when he was hung by Teacher Zephyr effortlessly is still vivid. Estimated from the strength of Teacher Zephyr, Hayden doesn't know the specific degree, only knows that this is another object that he cannot be an enemy before his magical power is achieved. Hayden walked slowly to Marshal Sora's table in a complicated mood. "Report, Marshal Kong, this time I am here," he said here, and stopped abruptly. Advertisement. He was shocked by what he planned to tell Marshal Kong's words next. "Grandmas, if I, a Navy, propose a candidate for Kiwahai in this way, is there some suspicion of surrendering to the enemy?" Fortunately, I didn't finish it all at once. After Hayden exhaled in his heart, he sorted out his current emotions. Then, under Marshal Kong's puzzled gaze, he continued. "I am here this time to report on what happened in the Windless Zone." This kind of trivial matter needs to be reported directly to him here? Marshal Sora immediately thought in his heart, but did not say anything. He nodded and motioned to the kid in front of him to continue. Hayden continued. "In the Windless Zone, I encountered the 9 snakes and pirates of the Amazon Lily Kingdom. The ability of their captain is very tricky. I guess it will be a trouble in the future." After that, he talked a long way, trying to describe Hancock's power as much as possible, Huyukong Marshal, so that he could take a roundabout way to tell the matter of suggesting Kiwahai. Hayden then racked his brains and talked to Marshal Sora. It was really difficult for him, who likes to go straight. But at this time, Marshal Sora was getting a little impatient with Hayden's nonsense. However, Marshal Kong still maintained the attitude of being a superior. He interjected when he watched this little devil talk nonsense. "The captain of the 9 snakes and pirates, the world government is already preparing to invite her to join the Kiwu Sea." Marshal Sora meant that now their navy can't move and will soon become a pirate of Kiwahai. Chapter 166. Give it to you. Previous chapter. Next chapter. Advertisement. "Okay." Hayden, who spoke too quickly, almost choked on his own saliva. Wait, are the actions of the world government so fast? Hayden thought to his heart that he didn't know the specific date when Hancock was offered the reward, but it could only be within this week. As soon as the reward was offered, the world government directly planned to give out a position in Kiwahai under the king. However, think about it now that 10 years have passed. Hayden himself traveled to this One Piece world for the first time. He accidentally saw a newspaper one time. At that time, Kaihai Yuanli was in 1502. At that time, Crocodile, one of the sand crocodile Kiwahai defeated by Luffy in the original work, had already become King Kiwahai since 1502. By now 1511, time has passed so long. Now it happens that there is a female pirate with strength, ability, and influence that caused such a sensation on her first debut. It is not impossible to give a position of Kiwahai. Marshal Kong then calmly continued to tell him, "I believe you should know what the privileges of King Kiwahai are." He heard the voice of Hayden's ears, and there was a vaguely intimidating feeling, and a chill suddenly rose from Hayden's spine. Advertisement. This sense of oppression. Hayden couldn't even reply immediately. Obviously, in his own eyes, the Marshal Kong in front of him did nothing but simply talked. Why would he feel as if he was being pressed by dozens of tons of steel? There was a little cold sweat on Hayden's forehead, and he couldn't help but wipe it. But the meaning of Marshal Sora's words, while he was thinking, he couldn't help but think of the pirate with the identity of Kiwahai. The 7 martial seas under kings is one of the 3 major forces on this great sea route. The 3 major forces are the navy, the 4 emperors, and the king under the 7 martial arts. These 3 powers maintained a delicate balance in this peculiar sea area on the Great Sea Route. He knows the privileges of King Kiwahai, Hayden. Basically, in general, it is a pirate who has an officially recognized license to pillage and kill in this world. When they become King Kiwahai, the rewards offered by them and their subordinates will be stopped, and the world government and navy will not pursue all the crimes they have committed before. On the sea, or on the islands, private snatching and other crimes will also be acquiesced by the world government. As long as a certain amount of property can be handed over to the world government, then everyone is in peace, and the world government will not send a navy to hunt down you, a pirate who committed heinous crimes. No, Hayden immediately shook his head in response. Marshal Kong, he is going to have a headache about the candidate for the task, and it seems that a perfect candidate for this task has just appeared in front of him. After listening, Hayden walked out of Marshal Kwong's office without hesitation. It should be that he himself just fooled Marshal Sora on Hancock's 9 snakes and pirates. How dangerous and powerful. He immediately made a look of dissatisfaction with the Kiwahai system under the king. Advertisement. Marshal Sora thought of this soon. He glanced outside the door and stared at the seaman standing guard with a strange look in his eyes, and thought to himself, "Little devil. This time the pirate named Boya Hancock is recruited to join the mission of the King Kiwahai. I will leave it to you today." As said before, if he first came to this world, when he had a systematic start, he would still have ambitions for some bad things in this world, and would like to use his own power to change the injustices in this world. Wait and so on. According to the information that came, the pirate named Boya Hancock should be a sweet fruit-capable person. Coupled with the beauty of the pirate, the combined power of the two will definitely be amazing, let alone after talking about the true strength of this pirate named Boya Hancock. Although I don't know how this kid can resist the female pirate's ability, but since he can contend against the female pirate, it is just right for this mission. However, Marshal Kong noticed the emotions of the little devil in front of him, but he didn't say anything, and then asked Hayden, "What else is there?" Read more at hotmtlnovel.zi. Chinese MTL fan fiction, second element novel can be read at hotmtl novel for free. This mission will start immediately tomorrow, and the related matters have been arranged. This is the relevant document of the king, Kiwahai. Remember to bring it back after signing. Hayden, standing outside the door, wanted to laugh out loud, but he couldn't do so now. After returning to his senses, Hayden nodded dully with a very reluctant expression, expressing his understanding. After that, I suddenly heard that this task was entrusted to him to carry out, and the unexpected surprise was as beautiful as the salty powder on the senbei. Thinking of this, Hayden couldn't help but chuckled. Advertisement. Looking at the little devil in front of him who seemed to be easily emotional, Marshal Sora was silent for a while, and thought about the candidates for the mission of the Kiwahai recruitment. The group of people from the world government threw the task directly to him, told him the general situation of the pirate and then let go. Although, after listening to Marshal Kong telling him in advance, this was shocking news for others, he also wanted to tell him directly to Marshal Kong in front of him, so that he would directly hand over the task of this time to the king, Shi Wuhai He. Under the power of this female pirate, the boy Hayden in front of him said from his mouth that he and the female pirate had a hard fight, and this little ghost could return intact and safe. Of course he secretly laughed in his heart. He didn't dare to laugh out loud in such a serious situation at this moment. Looking at Marshal Kong in front of him, Hayden said nothing to express his understanding. Read more at hotmtlnovel.zi. He also understands what Marshal Kong really means after saying this. It should be that the 9 snakes and pirates will join the 7 Marshalseas soon, and it is not possible to take action against the 9 snakes and pirates in this special period. The meaning of. As for Marshal Sora, why he said such things, Hayden should almost know the reason. Having said this, Marshal Sora paused and pulled out a stack of papers from the drawer in the next table, and while handing them to Hayden, he continued. But generally speaking, tasks of this level are basically not something he can handle with the rank of Major General. Regarding matters related to the 7th Wuhai under the king, generally speaking, at the very least, it will be handled by the Navy headquarters in the future. Hayden didn't understand it for the first time, and his eyebrows were frowned into a question mark. Anyway, Hayden made a look that he thought he was dissatisfied with the Kiwahai system. As for how Marshal Kong looked at him now, he didn't care much. Marshal Sora paused and continued. Well, you can go out, remember to close the door. After that, he went on to deal with the work that stopped on the table. Right now. After closing the door, the huge pressure inside disappeared instantly. Although the purpose of this trip is not the same as what he thought, the final result is the same. In this way, there is no need to think about other candidates, and there is no need to have a headache. After one is sent, what comes back is the stone sculpture of the entire warship. Whatever. Chapter 167 Lieutenant General Kuzan. Previous chapter. Next chapter. Advertisement. After that, with full of unexpected surprises, Hayden started a long way downstairs from the top of this huge naval fortress. After the long and boring time began, Hayden, who was walking, remembered another thing in his heart. Why did the people of the world government set up such a system under the rule of Kiwahai? On the surface, the world government has 7 powerful pirates instantly, and 7 thugs, which can deter other pirates in the world and maintain a very delicate balance on the great route. And such a thing that is good for them only needs to make them pay the small and trivial condition of acquiescing to pirate behavior. As long as the navy under their world government is not allowed to hunt down King Kiwahai. Although this looks very ugly to their image on the surface, but even so, who in the world can point fingers at what their world government is doing? Since Hayden had seen this section of the King's 7 martial seas in the original world, he had been a little puzzled about this system in his mind. Just like the crocodile in the original book, the Navy cannot monitor what he is doing with his back in real time. With the name of Kiwahai, not only will he not be hunted down by the Navy, but he can do his own things on a territory with peace of mind, and at the same time enjoy the benefits of being a pirate. Although occasionally, in order to maintain the reputation of the King, Kiwahai, he would do something in accordance with the requirements of the world government, but it is basically no problem. If you are unhappy with the intentions of the world government, you just quit, and the end result is only to return to the pirate stage and be hunted by the Navy. Such a thing with only benefits and basically no disadvantages. Hayden now thinks about it carefully. He is a little moved by the position of this king under Kiwahai. Advertisement. Hayden shook his head subconsciously and threw out the thought that had just appeared in his mind. Although the king's Kiwahai is good, his position in the Navy is more suitable for fishing. Thinking in a mess, he kept walking down the stairs until he saw a man with an explosive head on his head walking in front of him. Uncle Kuzan. Hayden felt that the back of the man in front was very familiar, and after thinking about it in his mind, it seemed that no one else would hang out here in the upper level of the naval fortress. The man in front was wearing a 2-meter-long black coat. The explosive head on his head was wrapped by a navy turban, revealing the curly hair beyond the turban behind his head. He walked leisurely without any rush. Uncle Kuzan. Hayden waved to Kuzan in front of him and greeted him. But Kuzan in front of him was in this empty corridor, and he turned his head when he heard a voice. "Oh, it's Hayden." Kuzan stopped and said to Hayden with his usual lazy expression on his face. This meeting was a long-lost meeting for both Kuzan and Hayden. Read more at hotmtlnovel.zi. As one of the 3 most powerful lieutenants in the Navy, Kuzan is naturally full of missions, and his schedule is full, and he rarely has the chance to meet Hayden. And after Hayden returned from a 2-year stay in Beihai some time ago, he didn't stay in the headquarters for a while, and then hurried to practice domineering. The time of the two is basically staggered, so they will not run into each other. "You are like this. From the time when I was small, now I am about to become an adult." Looking at the photos in the newspaper about the effects of Uncle Kuzan's freezing ability, Hayden always sighed. Advertisement. Seeing what Hayden this kid looks like now, it seems that his memory loss has not slowly recovered over time. At the beginning, the ship doctor told him that the missing part of the memory should slowly recover as he grows up, but now it seems that what the ship doctor said is not accurate. Hearing this, Hayden's voice suddenly seemed to be stuck by something. However, even if this incident did not happen to him, he began to think about telling Hayden the truth about what happened 10 years ago. Hayden had reached this point, but noticed that Uncle Kuzan's sleepy face suddenly smiled. Combine this. In order to prevent unpredictable effects from appearing in the future. The current Uncle Kuzan, the General Green Pheasant in the original book, his life is happening in front of Hayden little by little, and his formidable strength is naturally revealed. Immediately afterwards. The only difference between him and the current Lieutenant General Kuzan is that after he releases this level of moves, he will immediately become tired like a silly. After Kuzan was released, his body was as relaxed as if he had just yawned very often. Thinking about it now, Hayden feels he still has a long way to go. Although he played tricks on Hayden being beaten by Doflamingo in Beihai, he was miserable, but he also knew Doflamingo, that pirate. He could escape under the hunt of Lieutenant General Crane in Beihai. For a long time, it also explained his strength to a certain extent. Thinking about it this way, Hayden then stopped the unnecessary argument. Humph. Think you are great, don't care about you. The reason why he thinks of this now is because of Hayden's amazing growth rate. Read more at hotmtlnovel.zi. Chinese MTL fan fiction, second element novel can be read at hotmtl novel for free. How am I? Kuzan looked at the corridor ahead, and gradually returned to the past, back to the original O'Hara that no longer exists. Advertisement. Hayden coughed twice to express his dissatisfaction and then said, Oh, why are you doing this, Uncle? Uncle Kuzan, the news about you has been very popular recently. Hayden walked and chatted with Uncle Kuzan. After Hayden was rescued by Lieutenant General Crane had not fought against Doflamingo, and the only guy who had fought against Doflamingo was Hayden. Lieutenant General Kuzan Ya shook his head without taking the topic, and said to Hayden, You kid, how are you doing? I think when you came back from Beihai, you seemed to be mistreated. Kuzan didn't know whether the matter he was thinking about was good or bad. Although Hayden hadn't seen Kuzan during this period of time, there was news of Kuzan in the newspapers that swayed all over the sea. Seeing that the person in front was sure that it was Uncle Kuzan, Hayden stepped forward a bit faster and walked in line with Uncle Kuzan. This just tells him what level Hayden has reached now, at what age he has reached such a level. Almost 10 years have passed. The news that came out afterwards said that the Doflamingo family had found a place to rest for a long time, and they were still looking for doctors everywhere. Some things not described in the comics about these characters are now happening bit by bit in Hayden's current world. Why did he mention Beihai directly when he came up? He didn't want to be beaten back like that. In the atmosphere of silence for a while, Kuzan somehow felt in his heart, recalling the scene when he first met Hayden, a kid. At the beginning, the little devil's head, who seemed to be not as high as his knees, dared to hold a stick just like this to protect his companions from blocking his way. To be honest, he himself can achieve the same Uncle Kuzan's current trick that almost affects the power of the celestial phenomenon. So the two went downstairs side by side. Chapter 168 set sail again. Previous chapter. Next chapter. Advertisement. Hayden looked at the Uncle Kuzan next to him and didn't speak. He didn't know what topic to talk about. After thinking about it in his heart, it seemed that there was nothing to say. Moreover, he noticed that the look in Uncle Kuzan's eyes looked a little bit strange. In short, he couldn't think of the meaning in his eyes, which was very complicated. Kuzan was silent and walked along the corridor with Hayden. Now, although he was thinking about telling Hayden the truth about the incident 10 years ago, he didn't know if the timing was right, or if it was right now. Kuzan was silent for a while. Just at this time, Hayden, who was also silent, didn't know what topic to start with. The thoughts in his mind were diverging everywhere. Then, he suddenly thought of a very important thing. Hayden muttered, organizing in his mind what to say next. Then he spoke quickly and anxiously. Uncle Kuzan, I just remembered that an important matter needs to be dealt with immediately. See you next time. Immediately afterwards, before Kuzan had any reaction, Hayden left the naval fortress by himself. Kuzan looked at Hayden's disappearance in a blink of an eye, and the muscles on his face twitched. After that, advertisement. Hayden, who had walked out of the naval fortress and was walking home, couldn't help but stop and looked up at the sky above his head. It's getting late. The houses in Malin Vando's town began to light up. Thinking of what to do after sailing tomorrow, Hayden felt a little anxious. Can the bank in town still open this evening? He had to leave early tomorrow morning, and Hayden knew that the bank in the town must not open at that time tomorrow morning. It's been a long time since Bailey's banknote appeared on Hayden. The salary that the Navy issued to him every month was automatically applied to his card every month, but he now thinks about it carefully. It seems that he has never used his own money before. Basically, the Navy is full of food. The clothes on his body are not Navy uniforms, or some sets of clothes from the Navy. As for other necessities in life, they are basically brought in from within the Navy. Military supplies are better than ordinary commodities and require no money. Read more at hotmtlnovel.zi. The other thing is that every time the pirates' spoils are seized, there is no problem at all if they go along before handing them in. In the past, for Hayden, life did not require money, but what he planned to do after tomorrow, then he had to pay with money. After all, he didn't want to wear a coat with the word justice written on it, doing things that did not represent justice. Hayden speeded up his return home. His bank card still didn't know which corner he put in the house. Vertical son Hayden agreed to get up an hour in advance. Advertisement put on the spare coat of justice: bring 2 Zhanpo knives, and hold the Billy bills that he took out last night. Hayden immediately arrived at the crescent port of Marin Vander. At this time, a warship full of elite Navy headquarters is here ready to set off in the windless zone. Although Hayden felt that these Marines could not resist a single move in Hancock's hands, these navies had to be brought along. After all, as the Navy in their side, if there is no pomp, it will not work. At the same time, it was not yet the agreed time at this time. Because the seamen on the warship had prepared for departure early, they were a bit bored now waiting for the commander of this mission to arrive. As a result, a small group of seamen on deck began to gather together to discuss the situation of the mission. The mission this time did not cover people's eyes, nor did it need to act in secret. Besides, when they arrive at the mission location, these seamen will naturally know what mission they are doing. The situation of the mission was generally told to the Marines on the warship. They understood that this trip seemed to be a beautiful job. Called the female pirate Boya Hancock, who was called the world's first beauty by the newspaper as soon as she debuted. Boya Hancock, who was offered a reward of up to 80 million berries the first time he offered a reward, was the next king under Kiwahai. Jump directly to a height that most pirates on the Great Route may not be able to reach for a lifetime. As soon as the photo of Boya Hancock came out in the newspaper, it immediately captured the hearts of almost all the men among the pirates, and almost captured the hearts of all seamen in the Navy. Many seamen robbed all newspapers about this Boya Hancock. Either carefully put the picture of Boya Hancock in your arms, or cut the picture of Boya Hancock from the newspaper. Paste it on the wall, under the top bunk bed, and put it on the bed under the pillow. Although the newspaper described the female pirate very powerfully and looked terrifying. However, they had also heard that the commander of this mission had already fought against the female pirate, and the two won. Since the next most powerful enemy will be controlled by their commander, how could the female pirate's men contend with the elites of their Navy headquarters? Advertisement for them: this mission is a good opportunity to see the world's #1 beauty. The seamen gathered together to conduct various analyses. After the analysis, they looked at each other's eyes, and they all showed unclear smiles on their faces. Hey. 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 What are you laughing at? A strange voice suddenly sounded behind them. Hayden found the warship whose serial number was consistent with the warship serial number that Marshal Eyre told him, but as soon as he came up, he saw a group of Marines under him in this mission, gathering together as if discussing something important. Is it conspiring something? Hayden stared at the seamen who were scared by him in front of him, and suddenly thought of something in his heart. As for the Marines who were frightened by Hayden's voice, they looked back and saw Ching Hayden's appearance. They immediately knew that this was the highest commander of their mission, Major General Hayden. The elite of their navy is not the incompetent group. After knowing who the chief of the task was, they immediately began to do the chief's homework. It is natural to know that Major General Hayden, who is not very well known for the time being, is actually a very powerful Major General, but he has not had any military achievements and is still in the Major General class. Sir Hayden. After the seamen returned to their souls, they immediately greeted the chief in front of them in unison. Hayden nodded silently with still a trace of doubt. But he thought about it again, and now he wonders if some of these are not necessary. Then, Hayden asked the officers and Marines on the ship to gather on the deck. After getting to know the people one by one, he directly gave the order to start. Chapter 169: Landing in the Chambord Islands. Previous chapter. Next chapter. Advertisement. Yes. Standing on the bow of the warship, listening to the shouts of the younger brothers behind him, and looking at the endless ocean ahead, Hayden couldn't help but feel a sense of pride in his heart because of this atmosphere. Hayden shook the cloak of justice behind him and was rustled by the breeze on the marching warship. Destination: Chambord Islands. Hayden stood on the bow and shouted towards the sea in front of him. At this moment, the sea soldiers who were standing behind Hayden waiting for the command of the highest officer in front of him, they heard the destination they were going to next, and they were all at a loss. Chambord Islands? Shouldn't it be the Amazon Lily Kingdom in the Windless Zone? Although the Chambord Islands are very close to the Navy headquarters, they will not detour to the Chambord Islands. Hearing the calls of the younger brothers behind him, Hayden didn't care at all. He had already decided on this matter. Anyway, there is no time limit for this mission. I am also the highest officer of this mission. It shouldn't be a problem to take a detour to do my own thing. Just like a man's instinct. Before meeting a woman who can almost be described by the word, allure of the country in allure. Instinct will prompt you to show the best of yourself to this woman as much as possible. Hairstyle, dress, clean and tidy, spirit and so on. Advertisement and Hayden, dressed up when he accidentally met Hancock in the Windless Zone, how can I say? It is, barely, almost to the extent of being able to see people. During that time in Beihai, Hayden developed a habit of not being too lazy to clean up himself. The state of meeting Hancock did not reach his charming peak. Standing on the bow of the warship, Hayden couldn't help touching his chin. He thought about it now. It seemed that this was the reason why Hancock didn't fall in love with him at first sight. Okay. Hayden pursed his mouth and nodded silently. He seemed to have found the reason. However, the meeting this time would definitely be very different, and he changed his mind again. He had heard of the great stylist on the Chambord Islands before. The stylist named Tony is responsible for transforming a person's hairstyle, dress, overall temperament and so on. Generally speaking, after such a person's transformation, he will be so handsome that your mother will not know you a recommendation from a lieutenant admiral who did not want to be named Hayden. This is also a gift for himself to be a second adult. Hayden read it silently in his heart. Chambord Islands. Hayden, standing on the bow, repeated again, now adjust the course and continue to set off. The command from the supreme officer on the warship was beyond doubt, and the seamen on the warship recovered and immediately prepared to go to the Chambord Islands. Read more at hotmtlnovel.zi, Chambord Islands. Although Hayden has been in this world for so long, he hasn't really climbed the Chambord Islands, but he has seen it from a distance. The Chambord Archipelago is an island located near the headquarters of the Navy, and it is also a must-travel island for those who want to go to the New World. The island is built on top of the world's largest Yakuman mangrove forest, with a total of 79 largest mangroves in the world. The resin of the tree itself and the breath from the roots of the tree create the unique bubble culture on the island. One by one, like huge soap bubbles floating into the sky, bubble cars, bubble Ferris wheels, houses built with bubbles, and so on, there are many strange sights. There are all kinds of people on the island who will be active on this island. World nobles, bounty hunters, navy, pirates, basically all the people in the world who can name their professions, so the island's industry is developed. Advertisement: all the guys from the first half of the Great Route will stop on this island. Hayden thought that because of these conditions, the guy named Tony would start his business on the Chambord Islands. Although the complex situation of the Chambord Islands will not hinder Hayden's decision, he still has a problem. It was the guy named Tony, who was introduced to him by a lieutenant who did not want to be named. That guy is special. What of? It is still a mobile booth. The guy does not have a fixed location on the Chambord Islands, and his range of activities is the entire Chambord Islands. And as mentioned above, there are 79 mangrove trees. Each tree has corresponding towns and facilities. The islands are connected by bridges. At the same time, they are divided into several different areas according to the tree numbers. The guy named Tony will rush around in these several different areas, and no one will know exactly at which time and in which area he will appear. Just like the slogan of Tony's stylist Tony, you find it, and you get magic. Gone. Hayden has never had confidence in his luck. Some time passed. Sailed to the Chambord Islands in a warship with a crew of Hayden. The warship docked on the island of number 60, and the islands number 60 to 69 of the Chambord Islands were the territory of their navy. Of course Hayden will land here when he comes here. If he changes to another place, he will be fine. It was the seamen at the Chambord Islands naval base, watching the arrival of the Navy headquarters that had not been notified in advance, and it was a bit strange. After Hayden greeted the base commander of this naval base, he put most of his Navy on standby in the base. He only brought a small team of Navy to keep them behind. Advertisement, that's all. Hayden was followed by a small group of men and horses, walking on the Shambordian Islands with complicated conditions. According to the information from the naval base of the Chambord Islands, the area on the Chambord Islands is roughly divided into 6 areas. Number 1 to number 29, the small islands within these numbering ranges are mixed areas on the islands, full of very dark things such as human trafficking, which are called illegal areas. The 30th to the 39th are the amusement facilities on the island and so on. 40 to 49 are places such as tourist areas and specialty streets on the island. 50 to 59 is the place where the shipyard still coats the ship, which is the necessary process to get down to the fisherman island in the deep sea. Number 60 to number 69 is the territory of the Navy and the world government. Finally, from the 70th to the 79th is a variety of hotel streets, full of indescribable things. With all this information, the most important thing for Hayden on the Chambord Islands is that it is better to avoid illegal areas as much as possible. Of course, Hayden was not afraid of the illegal zone, but the old guy living in the illegal zone. Although he had forgotten the Pluto Raleigh known as the One Piece's right arm, he lived in the place on the Chambord Islands, but now according to the intelligence, Hayden thinks that he can only stay in illegal areas. In the comics, Raleigh, the king of Hades, looks handsome, and at the same time looks like a kind old grandpa. However, this is the real world. The more he understands, the more Hayden is impressed by the legendary figures in this world. Raleigh is a pirate, Hayden is a navy. Hayden doesn't want to hang on before he is about to become a second adult. Chapter 170. Step into the Hotel Street. Previous chapter. Next chapter. Advertisement. Chambord Islands. The Yakuman mangroves on the island are like the original high-rise buildings, towering among the world. Clean climate, fresh air. Green healthy plants are almost everywhere in the eye, and there is a green ocean on the island. Coupled with the special resin secreted from the respiration of the Yakuman mangroves all the time, soap bubbles of different sizes emerge from the resin due to the expansion of the air. This soap bubble is not a real soap bubble. The bubbles that emerged from the roots of the Yakuman mangroves were at least strong enough to be stepped on by a normal man's weight and would not burst. All this combined into the Shambordian Islands that appeared in front of Hayden at this moment. Hayden led a small team directly out of the naval base at number 60. Stepping on the grass that looked a little sticky because of the special resin under his feet, Hayden walked in the forefront alone, with a large map spread out on his hand, which was the sightseeing map of the Chambord Islands. Because all areas of the Chambord Islands have been explored long ago, he doesn't have to bother the Navy in the base to get him a map of the Navy's interior. He only needs the map that ordinary people use when they board the Chambord Islands. Hayden decided from the beginning to try not to go to the illegal areas of the Chambord Islands, but about the Tony stylist, he didn't have any information about the person's location. There are so many places to stay on the Chambord archipelago, and every place may appear. In other words, if you use stupid methods, you have to go to every place. Why doesn't the Navy's intelligence have any information about this person? Hayden frowned while looking at the map of the Chambord Islands, thinking in his heart, the lieutenant general who did not want to be transparent did not tell me the details. Advertisement used the naval base as the starting point on the map of Chambord Islands. On the left is the area of number 70 Hotel Street, on the right is the number 50 shipyard and the coated area, and the area directly in front of the number 60 Navy area is a part of the illegal zone. Hayden didn't know how the people in their Navy could endure the fact that the illegal zone was their neighbor, but he didn't care much. The Shambordian Islands is a must-travel island for every pirate who wants to go to the New World. If Hayden wants to deal with the chaos on this island, he must directly wipe out all the pirates in this world. The name, pirate, must be completely wiped out. Otherwise, after Hayden has cleaned up the pirate situation on the island, he can only maintain it for a while. The illegal zone in the middle was crossed by Hayden from his route, so there were only 2 routes left on both sides, Hotel Street and Shipyard. After thinking about it, Hayden decided to choose the Hotel Street line. The area of Hotel Street is naturally a dense place where people gather. If there are more people, there are of course more people talking. In addition, The places of this kind of hotel are generally not good places to inquire about the news. With so many people, Hayden didn't believe that he couldn't find a guy who knew the news of the Tony stylist. Read more at hotmtlnovel.zi, don't lose it. Hayden, who hadn't stopped, looked at the area that was about to cross the bridge to reach the hotel street. He suddenly turned around and reminded the team behind him. "Yes, sir." The seamen behind immediately responded in unison. Hayden, who was walking in the front, could already see the lively scene on the island number 70 on the opposite side before crossing the bridge. Rows of small houses with different architectural shapes are gathered on the island of number 70. People from different places in the world naturally bring the architectural styles of different places in the world. The crowd was full of people, even if it was not the busiest time of the night, it was the same. Advertisement. Hayden led a group of Marines behind him, and walked across the connecting bridge in front of him. It can be said that he officially left their Navy site and arrived at the Hotel Street area of number. Hayden was wearing a white suit close to pink, a coat of justice over his shoulders, and 2 Zhanpakudao knives crossed on his back. He is now nearly 2 meters tall and standing upright. Only, in the eyes of the team of Marines behind him, the officer in front of him seemed to have no arrogance. After contact with the officer's personality was more approachable. If they replaced Hayden's Navy uniform and let them see it, they would never have thought that the officer was someone who could compete with the lieutenant general. If he becomes doing nothing, he can feel the oppression of his strength only from his aura, and he can do this as long as he releases a little spiritual pressure. However, Hayden contracted all the spiritual pressure in his body, and he was used to such a state that looked more like an ordinary person. This state not only allows him to achieve unexpected effects when facing unknown enemies, but also exercises his spiritual pressure control ability every minute and every second. That's all. A navy that looked very young and imposing led a team of navy with long spears and a sailor's scimitar behind him, and a group of people stepped into the Hotel Street area. But, for these people staying in the Hotel Street, the advent of the navy is no surprise, and all kinds of people who are mixed have no idea about the navy. On the Chambord Islands, it is not their navy that can cover the sky with one hand. Even if the Hotel Street is located next to their naval base, as long as the navy does not come to provoke them, they will naturally not pay attention to the arrival of the navy. Advertisement. And Hayden also ignored the fact that all kinds of people on the streets around him had no good intentions towards them as a group of people. In the perception of ray pressure, there was no guy on the 70th island that could catch his attention, so the group of guys who looked very ferocious in front of him were basically guys who couldn't hold his sword for a second. No need to worry, no need to bother. On the contrary, the atmosphere of this Hotel Street makes Hayden a little excited. "Sir, what are we doing here on the Chambord Islands?" At this moment, the Marine closest to Hayden interrupted the officer, who looked a little excited. Not only him, but the seamen behind him are equally curious. "Huh?" Hayden stopped, blinking his eyes and changing his eyes. "Didn't I say?" He turned his head and said to the brothers with question marks on their faces. "I didn't say it." "Ah?" Hayden scratched his head when he heard the answer. "I'm here to find someone named Tony in the Chambord Islands." The seamen did not react immediately, and the same question suddenly appeared in their hearts. Who is Tony? What does this have to do with their task of enlisting Kiwahai? Who is Tony? Sir. After a while, the seaman who asked the question first recovered and couldn't help asking. Chapter 171 Street Thief. Previous chapter. Next chapter. Advertisement. Who is Tony? Hayden repeated subconsciously. Don't you know Tony? A famous stylist in the world? Do not know. The same answers came one after another. However, as soon as Hayden spoke, he knew that the answers of these people were basically ignorance. If it were not for the recommendation of the uncle who did not want to be named, even if Tony is a world-famous stylist, he would not have learned about this. All right. Hayden didn't intend to explain anything to these boys. Follow me honestly and don't stand alone on the Chambord Islands. I think you should know that you are a navy on this island. The situation after placing the order, he said. Although the seamen still didn't understand why the officer in front of him was looking for that person, they did not dare to interfere with the decision of the officer in front of him. After everyone answered and understood, they continued to follow in the footsteps of Hayden in front of the street on this Hotel Street. People come and go on the boulevard of Hotel Street. There are people of all shapes and appearances, and everyone's profession is quite different. And these strange people basically come here with similar reasons. The reason why Hotel Street is called Hotel Street, as the name suggests, is that there are so many hotels that people can call this area the word Hotel Street. Hotel Street is a place for people who want to stay on the Chambord Islands for more than a day. Such people will definitely come. The hotel provides a variety of services, such as sleeping, eating, bathing, and so on. Of course, there are also indescribable services that are always unavoidable as a hotel. Advertisement. Even in broad daylight, the streets on both sides are still lit with dazzling neon signboards, with all kinds of bold and seductive words written on them, tempting everyone who comes to the hotel street and tempting them to step forward to the hotel, inside. This is not only the bold vocabulary on each hotel, but also most of the unique selling points displayed in front of each store. These selling points refer to the things that have almost gathered all the characteristics of the world. It can be said that as long as you come here, you will basically taste the features of the world. As Hayden and his party went deeper into the area of Hotel Street, they came to the inner lot of Hotel Street. Gudong. Hayden, who was walking in front, couldn't help swallowing his saliva. The Wawa world in front of him made his eyes blind to him for a while, and the impulses in his body were like wild beasts on the prairie at this moment. He seemed to have forgotten the reason why he made a special detour to the Chambord Islands, until there was a sound behind him. Gudong, Gudong, Gudong. This would forcefully endure the semen that felt in his heart, and they finally couldn't hold back this meeting. Now the surrounding situation, let alone Hayden's concentration, is not ordinary people. He can't hold it. The group of sea soldiers behind him has long been unable to hold it. Read more at hotmtlnovel.zi. Hayden was shocked back to reality by the sound of a group of toads screaming behind him, and he also suddenly realized that their group would no longer know where they were going. He couldn't help looking around the surroundings, as if they had just stepped onto the area of Hotel Street in the last second, but the place behind this meeting was not what it was before. Hayden feels that he is a bit too unpromising. Although it is the first time to visit the streets of this kind of adults, he shouldn't be lost in this colorful world. Hey hey hey. Hayden immediately shouted to the group of lost souls behind him. Just wake me up. See what you guys are like. This little scene has become this in a way. What if you need you guys to go to the battlefield at that time? Hayden's tone at this time was very severe, and he was talking with a hint of emotion that hates iron and steel. Hearing these words in the hearts of their sea soldiers, they immediately brought them back to their souls, and at the same time, a deep humiliation appeared in their hearts. Advertisement. Unexpectedly, it was the first time to go on a mission with this powerful officer. In less than a day after they came out, they presented this unbearable scene of themselves to the officer. All the Marines couldn't help but lower their heads, standing in the middle of the street filled with neon lights, accepting the reprimand of Chief Hayden before him. When Hayden trained the group of Marine soldiers in front of him like a rice-pecking chicken, on both sides of this narrow street, outside the hotel stood big sisters of different colors. They were watching this on the street play. The Navy is not uncommon to them, but they have not seen such a behavior before, and they walked halfway and stopped to start training people. Brother Navy, come in and play, don't be shy. Big sister has fun here. Curious, they began to raise the silk scarf with their small hands, and whispered in their mouths while waving them in the air. For a time, on this pink Hotel Street, everyone's eyes were attracted by the people these big sisters greeted, that is, Hayden and the Navy in the middle. Some find it funny, some find it fun, some feel a little scared, and of course some find it unpleasant. Hey, kid. Are you a group of people coming to us to make trouble? An extremely arrogant voice accompanied by bursts of applause suddenly sounded behind Hayden. Followed by the big sisters outside the hotel on both sides of the street, there was a scream of fright covering their mouths. You Navy bastards, it's best to make way for our boss. That's it. Dared to stand in the way of our boss at work. Advertisement, never see who owns this site. At the same time, several clamors, perhaps a dozen or so, seemed to echo the sound that sounded behind Hayden at the beginning. At this moment, Hayden, who was facing his back, listened in his ears, as if a group of excrement in a circle was making a buzzing sound. There is no need for Hayden to turn around and see the situation behind him at this moment. Judging from this voice alone, he knows what they are probably going into now. He never went to trouble with ants, but the ants will always find him automatically from time to time. Sir. Sir, behind you. At this moment, the Marines who were in confession had already raised various spears in their hands. The muzzles of the black holes were all aimed at the back of the officer in front of them, and the expressions on everyone's faces were serious. Although Hayden said that the reaction speed of the boys in front of him was not bad. That is, why always troublesome guys who don't have long eyes. Obviously he is also a Navy who wears a coat of justice and holds the rank of Major General. He couldn't help holding his forehead with one hand, and waved his hand at the group of younger brothers in front of him, motioning them to put down their weapons. And this scene of a local, street thief, on the hotel street against the Shanghai Navy naturally attracted all kinds of people on the hotel street to stop and watch. Almost no one can describe the guy who can come to the Shambordian Islands from the first half of the relatively dangerous and Great Sea route. He has followed a powerful captain here, and he is the powerful captain. Although these people are different in strength, they all have one thing in common: the Navy is their enemy. Although they didn't want to take action together at the moment, they still wanted to see when they stood by and watched the play. Chapter 172, Episode 172, Previous Chapter, Next Chapter. Advertisement. But there are various differences between people and everyone, and one of these is that everyone's intelligence is different. Just among the crowd of onlookers who were unkind to Hayden and his Navy, some people imagined in their minds how the people on this site would tidy up this group of Navy. And some smart people think completely differently. If we look at Hayden's line of Navy from the surface, and judged by the situation revealed on the surface, Hayden's line of people looks like an ordinary Navy. Although the leader is wearing a Navy Justice Coat, he has the military rank that is qualified to wear the Navy Justice Coat. Some of them also know the specific rank to be worthy of having the Justice Coat. That is, there is no need to be a Major General or a Lieutenant General of the headquarters. These two kinds are enough to easily suppress the Navy on their hotel street. You only need to reach the rank of the Navy Chief Lieutenant to have a Navy Justice Coat. Thus, in other words, this Navy leader who looks very young and has no power at all is likely to be the second generation of high-ranking officials in the Navy, and he casually obtained the qualification to wear a coat of justice. These are the first thoughts of smart people, but they don't think so after thinking about it. On the surface, the leading Navy thinks that this guy is very weak, and looks like an ordinary person in this world, except for a height of almost 2 meters. However, the two delicate swords with scabbards on his back, plus they could feel the extraordinariness of those two swords just from a distance. If this Navy is the second-generation official in the first impression in their eyes, and it is only because of a lot of money that they can buy these two swords, then it is impossible for this guy's strength to protect these two swords for so long. I am afraid that the pirates in other places have already snatched the two swords of this guy, and even his life will not survive. Advertisement. In addition, the wise man among these guys didn't just judge Hayden who looked like ordinary people because of this. Although the Navy leader only brought out a small group of seamen. But the small group of Navy behind this guy, don't look at them being stunned by the imposing officer in front of them. The aura of this small group of Marines is not a joke. Every seaman involuntarily exuded that kind of confident aura, telling others that this group of Navy was definitely not the kind that others had seen before. Let alone 1 to 10, they can do it in 1 to 20. At this time, in this neighborhood called Gong Huo Ding by the locals, Hayden led a small group of dozens of elite Navy headquarters and local street thieves, standing in the middle of the street facing each other. Now it is not only the big sisters who stood on both sides of the street in the first place, but also dense crowds have gathered on the street. Of course, the dense crowd was tacitly on the street, leaving an empty stage for the confronting two sides. Read more at hotmtlnovel.zi. They come in different shapes, and the bells and whistles are basically the pirates screaming and making noises. Hayden rubbed his nose, and then turned around calmly, looking at the group of ground snakes who were looking for him, the Navy. The closest to him was an extremely slender man. After seeing this scene, everyone watching the show basically had similar expressions, their eyes widened uncontrollably, and an unbelievable sound from their mouth. How could this guy sneeze just to avoid the invisible movement from behind up? This is not the territory of your Navy. Ha 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 ha. These asterisk Navy dare to make trouble here. Hayden just blocked his hand in front of him to prevent the droplets from this guy from passing over, and at the same time he stepped back a step back, slightly distanced from this guy. Advertisement. Just after the words of the group of them were finished, one of them wanted to put a hand on Shanghai Deng's shoulder, trying to force the Navy, who could not understand the situation, to face them. Most of the people in the surrounding hotels also seemed to smell the good wind. The guys who can come to the Chambord Islands are almost people who have seen strong winds and waves. They're not afraid of things, they're good things. Sir. Please. Oh yeah. Hayden felt the noise that was constantly beating at him, and he couldn't help feeling a little headache. Navy, let me get down quickly. Standing in the middle of the team headed by Daniel, although he said that he meant to be friendly to Hayden, his expression did not really want to be friendly to Hayden, the Navy. Things really got worse now. Behind him stood a team of dozens of people, and the guy standing in the middle of the team was a man in his 40s wearing a black leather suit, full of rivets, and combing moxie dry head. They can't wait to watch the Navy being killed by this group of people in front of their eyes, being slaughtered by this group of people like a group of animals. The group of Marines in front of him who did not obey Hayden's order to put down their guns immediately reminded Hayden. But they didn't dare to shoot directly. Although they saw the arm of the enemy in front of them, the position of the officer was directly opposite their muzzle. Nothing unusual, nothing special, and Hayden had no impression. The already lively fireworks, at this time, under the roar of the group of pirates who were afraid that things were not going to be big enough, now it is like the noisy atmosphere of a carnival party. Okay, Hidaka. Don't scare our Lord Navy. Advertisement. He couldn't help but scratched his head and thought in his heart, hey, kid. Be careful behind. Hurry up, let the uncle go home to find a mother. Hee. The slender man named Hagao laughed at Hayden's weird, and then returned to the dozens of people behind him, standing next to their boss. Well, you little white-faced Navy, you dare to ignore our boss. The slender man standing in front of Hayden screamed at him in a sharp voice. Read more at hotmtlnovel.zi. Chinese MTL fan fiction, second element novel can be read at hotmtl novel for free. His expression seemed as if Hayden would never give up if Hayden didn't explain to them. The man named Donnie said that he couldn't help but pause, and his emotions were brewing. Our boss is talking to you. Didn't you hear it? Don't turn around to see me. After the eldest man waited for Hidaka to stand back in the team, he slowly moved his burly body like a bodybuilder to Hayden. For a time. At this time, the group of street thieves who hadn't waited for the Navy to turn around in front of them for dozens of seconds were angry. It's strange to say that Hayden suddenly felt a little itchy nose, an unbearable irritation, forced him to sneeze, and subconsciously bent down slightly to avoid the unknown palm behind him. You Navy came to our work, do what you should enjoy, don't make trouble, don't cause trouble, then we won't take care of you. Chapter 173 Shake the Air Previous chapter Next chapter. Advertisement. Why? Why do you want to be on our model sanitary streets to hinder the normal travel of tourists? Isn't it great if you are the Navy? You can set up checkpoints at will? The tone and demeanor of Daniel's words at the moment was very aggrieved, just like ordinary people who barely lived a miserable life under the hands of those tyrants. As he spoke, the thick right hand of the burly middle-aged man in front of him seemed to wipe his eyes involuntarily, and he seemed to be crying because of emotion. And some of the pirates who are often in the area of gonghuding, they understand at a glance what Danny is thinking and planning. This guy is starting again. Danny's methods are really old-fashioned. The crowd around began to whisper to each other, lowering their bodies and whispering to communicate the scene in front of them. However, some people did not comment on the scene in front of them. As long as it is a person who has no mental or spiritual problems, he can have an understanding of what is happening on the court. On one side is dozens of fierce local forces, and on the other side is the Navy with only a dozen people. Although the Navy has weapons such as spears in its hands, the comparison of numbers is an overwhelming disadvantage. A discerning person knows at a glance that the current situation is very unfavorable for the Navy side, so the Navy party in the field, the high-level Navy, will definitely understand the situation that is unfavorable for him now. However, under such a situation, the Navy seemed to worry about nothing, as if there were dozens of local gangsters in front of them who could kill them with a single punch. There was no general. The strange behavior of the Navy in the field once again confirmed the inner thoughts of some onlookers. This navy with 2 swords on its back is not a navy that can be cleaned up at will. Immediately afterwards, advertisement when Hayden just wanted to speak back, he saw the person in front of him continue to talk non-stop. Now, let me say, what if your navy stands on this street and hinders our business on this hotel street? When Danny said this, his tone suddenly changed, turning into that threatening tone, and said coldly, "I see, you have to hand in something before we can let you go," he said, rubbing the thumb and index finger of his right hand back and forth. Everyone around the scene understood the meaning of Daniel's gesture. Of course, Hayden also understood what the finger-rubbing gesture meant. Subsequently, following their boss's words, the team of dozens of people behind him slammed into the ground. The combined energy of dozens of people immediately shook the feet of everyone present. With the cold eyes of the silent dozens, the atmosphere in the air instantly solidified. It seems that everyone in the field can see with naked eyes the invisible tension in the air. Read more at hotmtlnovel.zi. Do you mean this? After hearing this person's question, Hayden immediately took out a stack of Bailey banknotes worth 10,000 yuan from his pocket, and shook it in the air in his hand. Regardless of whether this wad of banknotes can be easily taken out by Hayden, this wad of 10,000 yuan bills together is a very large sum. These were all taken out of the card by Hayden in advance, and Bailey on his body was not just those in his hand. As the banknotes in Hayden's hands waved and swayed, the smell of money slowly drifted into the space at this moment. In the eyes of the people around, the navy on the field seemed to have no idea what was going to happen next, and directly took out Barry without even thinking about it. And Hayden's actions were just in line with the mind of the bully Daniel. Sure enough, this silly navy was so easy to succeed. He had just spoken, and the navy sent Barry directly to him. Danny's eyes were only the wave of Bailey in Hayden's hands at the moment, and the vision beyond that was completely dark. His mouth was raised uncontrollably, and a very strange and unpleasant laugh came from his mouth. Advertisement. Hee. Navy, it seems that you are still a sensible person. Donnie then retreated to the real world in a state of immersion, and said to the navy in front of him with an uncontrollable smile on his face, "Today's work is really easy, so many Pele can go to have a good drink and play again tonight." Danny, who had fallen behind, couldn't help thinking happily in his heart, and then stretched out his hand towards Bailey in Hayden's hand, wanting to take the money in his hand. Before Hayden could move, a dozen seamen behind him immediately pointed their guns at the man standing in front of the officer. They know the strength of the chief in front of them, but even so, as subordinates they still have to do what they should do as subordinates. This aiming action immediately aroused the movement of a group of dozens of people under Donnie. Shooing, all kinds of weapons were held in their hands, such as spears, sailor scimitars, meteor hammers. The tension in the scene suddenly rose rapidly. Swords are on the verge of breaking out. Relax. Hayden faced this group of gangsters, did not turn around, and raised his right hand to signal to the little brothers behind him not to be so nervous, making it look like the group of guys in front of him are very powerful. "Sir," Hayden would temporarily ignore the inquiries of the younger brothers behind him. And because the navy's muzzle was all aimed at his own Daniel, after a pause, he continued to reach out to Bailey in the navy's hand in front of him. Hayden then put the taken-out Bailey back into his pocket. Advertisement. Danny saw the navy's movements. He immediately asked loudly, "What do you mean?" He seemed to understand that the navy hadn't planned to hand over Bailey from the beginning, and he happened to be right. Hayden ignored the yelling man in front of him. He didn't rush. His hands began to sort out the aura on his body that was polluted by this group of people. His hands were patted like dust on the place that was almost grabbed by this group of guys every time. The filthy smell of these guys had already contaminated the space of about 20 centimeters on the body surface. At the same time, with each slap, Hayden began to slowly release the contracted spiritual pressure on his body. Little by little, gradually, every slap seemed to shake the surrounding air. The streets, the air, the Yarkam and mangroves, all the people around. It seemed that everything around him was afraid of the terrifying, invisible breath emanating from Hayden. Subsequently, the local gangsters in front of Hayden were shocked by the breath that they didn't understand the specific meaning. Daniel, the closest to Hayden, had already lost his ability to speak and his body control in fright. The staring eyes have lost their focus, and I don't know what he is looking at. Then, Hayden's last slap fell. Chapter 174 Awe. Previous chapter. Next chapter. Advertisement. Boom. Hayden's last slap was like a command. In front of him, a group of local forces composed of dozens of people suddenly fell on the street one after another, like dominoes. In just a few seconds, dozens of people collapsed into a large area, just to block the narrow street. Arm next to arm next to hip, face next to foot. Although the eyes of these dozens of people are open, in fact, they have lost consciousness and their pupils have already lost focus. What happened to this? Hey, hello. Did the Navy do anything just now? That guy's body doesn't seem to touch the group of people like Donnie? Why did Daniel and the group fainted directly? Although the onlookers were oppressed by Hayden's spiritual pressure, Hayden did not expand the scope of the spiritual pressure to affect the areas outside them, and they were not directly oppressed by the spiritual pressure. The crowd of onlookers stared wide-eyed, and involuntarily exclaimed. They looked at the group of people who fell on the street, and then looked at the Navy standing in the field that didn't seem to launch any attack. They couldn't understand what was happening before their eyes for the first time. The Navy didn't make a move, or even moved slightly in his footsteps, but simply patted the dust on his body, and then the Danny group fell to the ground one by one before him. In this chaotic moment, some onlookers seemed to have a seemingly impossible guess about the current situation in their hearts. Advertisement combined with the inexplicable aura that had oppressed them for a short time. The pirates who had seen these scenes immediately came to their senses and thought of it. The feeling just now was very similar to the feeling of domineering and domineering. Although it is impossible for this thing to emerge from a Navy body, the scene before them now only seems to be domineering and domineering, which seems to be in line with the current situation. Huo Ran thought of this. Because of the instinctive fear that had not dissipated just now in everyone's hearts, the feeling at this moment suddenly intensified. And the seamen just behind Hayden. Although they were not oppressed by Hayden's special spiritual pressure, they were about the same distance from the group of Donnie, but they were still shocked by the breath that burst from the officer in front of them. They didn't know when the spears in their hands were hanging down, and their bodies had already reacted in surprise before each of them was unaware. Sir. Amazing. Read more at hotmtlnovel.zi. It's just the explosive momentum that has cleaned up this group of guys. It turned out to be only the strength that had been heard, and finally showed a corner in front of their eyes at this moment. The little brothers behind Hayden, at this time, the respect for the chief in front of him became more and more crazy. Such an excited emotion is simply higher than the insignificant, beyond ordinary things, reaching a certain unattainable, pure power of reverence. Just as humans would instinctively feel awe of the unresistible power of nature, Lord Hayden in front of him is the nature in their world. Now, Hayden was not surprised by the scene in front of him. He didn't care about the surprised reactions of people around him because of him. Advertisement. After taking pictures of the filth on his body, he slowly unbuttoned the bottom button of his suit to make it easier for him to move physically. He ignored the little brothers behind him for the time being, and walked slowly towards the Moxigan scalp boss who fell on the street in front of him. Hayden walked with his feet to the head of the boss of Moxigantu, and now he can solve this person's head directly by raising his feet and then falling. But he is not the kind of demon who kills indiscriminately. In the eyes of the onlookers, Hayden, the Navy's body, slowly squatted down, and then, happiness. The powerful palms suddenly slapped the boss's face with several slaps. Who dares to beat Lousy? Who is it? The fiery sensation on his face immediately irritated Donnie, who was in a coma. He immediately cursed and opened his eyes. Now, the Moxigan head erected on Daniel's head was directly slapped down because of Hayden's great strength, and the right cheek that touched Hayden's slap instantly swelled into a big bag, glowing with blushing luster. Immediately afterwards, Danny, who suddenly woke up, immediately saw Hayden in front of him. The last scene of the rupture of consciousness, at this moment, like a tide resurgence, all rushed to Dan's heart. He remembered that he was suddenly fainted just now, and the direct reason for him being fainted was the feeling that the Navy body suddenly woke up in front of him. The aura that resembled an ancient beast appeared on this Navy's body, and the suffocating aura hit his face instantly. This middle-aged man in his 40s, realizing the horror of the Navy in front of him, was like a weak girl in his heart, and his body was soft when he woke up. Advertisement immediately afterwards, he moved on the ground as if being threatened, using his knees to move, trying to stay away from the navy in front of him. Hayden, who was squatting down, felt a little strange at this time. Shouldn't it? Why did he withdraw his spiritual pressure? Why this guy is still afraid of him, and he also looks like this. Hayden scratched his head in a puzzled manner. Hey, calm down. He gestured to Daniga, who was posing as a girl. You should be the snake on this street, right? He continued to question Daniel. He did not forget the reason for coming here on this trip. Since this guy seems to be the boss of this street, his information and intelligence should be very good. Hearing the enquiry from the navy in front of him, Daniel did not dare to speak, shaking his head immediately. Don't look at him being so scared by Hayden now, but his identity as the boss of this block of workers has not changed. As a boss, he is naturally knowledgeable. He knows what kind of people there are in this world, and he knew the type of navy in front of him when he was very young. On the surface, this person looks approachable and has no emotional appearance. But in fact, as long as his emotions are moved, this type of person is the most ruthless one when starting. Knowing the huge gap between the navy and the navy in front of him, Dan did not dare to say a word, for fear that he might provoke the navy in front of him. Seeing that the guy in front of him didn't seem to be ready to answer his questions, Hayden maintained good patience and continued to ask, Hey, what can I do? You shouldn't be scared by me. Donnie continued to shake his head after listening, but this time he increased the speed of the swing. Chapter 175. The message arrives. Previous chapter. Next chapter. Advertisement under Leary. Island 74 on the Chambord Islands. The small island built by Yakuman's mangroves made the sound of rising bubbles from time to time, and the bubbles that emerged slowly rose in the shaking, and they were incomparably gorgeous under the sunlight projected from the sky. At this time, on the streets of the Gonhuding district, almost everyone on the island surrounded this street. During the stalemate between Hayden and Daniel, there were even people from other islands who crossed the bridge and came here. The navy clashed with other people. This is a good show that many people like to watch. Daniel faced Hayden's second question and still didn't answer him satisfactorily, and stupidly speeded up, shaking his head. Looking at the horrified Moxie Gantu boss in front of him, Hayden took a deep breath and then stood up. And this kind of scene is in the eyes of everyone who is watching the outside world at this moment. Suddenly, there was a strange feeling in their hearts. How did they feel that the temperament of the navy body was no different from them at this time, except that he was wearing navy clothes? The positions of Hayden and Daniele have changed, and the current situation is all in Hayden's hands. It seems that it needs to be stimulated. Hayden looked down at the boss Mohegan, who was sitting on the ground, and thought to himself, since this guy didn't plan to answer his questions honestly, he had no choice but to take unnecessary measures. Originally, I only planned that as long as you answered the question, I wouldn't do anything to you. Slowly speaking, Hayden paused and then stretched his right hand toward the hilt behind the knife. Since you intend to do this, then do it like this. The voice of the navy in the field was flat, without any fluctuations. However, listening to the ears of Big Knee, who was slumped on the ground, the voice of the navy was like a huge bell ringing in his ears. Advertisement, etc., etc. Donnie shouted hurriedly. This person can get rid of his group just by virtue of his aura, so what does the action of him reaching out and drawing a knife mean? Daniel did not dare to imagine, nor did he want to imagine. I said, Danny immediately raised his hands to signal surrender, and moved his knees in the direction of Hayden. Then, he suddenly thought of an important question in his panicked mind. What am I talking about? At the same time that this question popped up in Danny's mind, he immediately said it without consciously. Oh, Hayden immediately looked at this man as if he was fascinated. He was a little relaxed. Today will be a brand new day for him to make a facelift. After all, he does not want to make the scene too bloody. Do you know that the stylist named Tony is there now? Hayden asked directly afterwards. Tony? The man named Donnie did not immediately respond to the Navy's question in front of him. The two words Tony and stylist, what does the Navy ask this mean? Read more at hotmtlnovel.zi. Danny suddenly had a question in his mind. He did not immediately think of the famous Tony stylist on the Chambord Islands. After all, although the guy doesn't look like a normal person, he doesn't seem to like to provoke the Navy. Then, With his brain overloaded with fear, he thought about it, and in the end he only thought that the Navy should be asking him where the Tony stylist was. This Navy wants to ask this. Danny was puzzled on his face, and continued to say with a little uncertainty. Stylist Tony. He also took a peek at the Navy's face in front of him. Hayden did not speak and nodded his head to indicate that he was right. Advertisement then, after watching Hayden's face carefully, Big Knee dared to continue speaking. Tony. As he said, he glanced at the watch on his arm, and the time was displayed at about 2 o'clock in the afternoon. That fellow Tony. No one knows the specific location of that guy. However, there are often people at this time. I saw him on the spot, and he should be in the area of the soap bubble park around the 30th. Danny's eyes looked towards the sky, carefully recalling all the information about the stylist in his mind. At this time, Hayden muttered to himself, then looked at the watch on his left wrist. At 2 o'clock in the soap bubble park. He continued to mutter to himself that the stylist's life was really colorful. Instead of him, when he is usually not working, 2 o'clock now is exactly the time to take a nap after a full meal. Hayden then looked at Boss Moxigantu, who was slumped on the ground again, and the two of them immediately collided. Hayden didn't notice any strange meaning in his eyes, but if he wanted to tell the truth, just from the eyes of this person, he couldn't tell whether this person was telling the truth or fooling him. However, Hayden thought again, after touching with his own spiritual pressure, this guy shouldn't have the courage to fool him again, right? Then, Hayden, who got news from the stylist, didn't plan to hang out here anymore. Hayden immediately looked around at everyone around them watching the show. He didn't feel anything about being watched. The group of people surrounding them, he knew at a glance that these guys were basically criminals like pirates. The pendulum clock in Hayden's heart catches them or just ignores them, erratic between these two choices. However, the message that the stylist is basically in the soap bubble park at 2 o'clock made Hayden hesitate. Well, forget it today. Then Hayden turned and stood facing the Marines behind him. He immediately issued the order. Advertisement, tie up all the guys who fell on the ground. Tell the Navy of the Chambord Islands to come over, take these guys back and lock them up. Yes. Although the Marines were still in a state of surprise, they still did not immediately respond to the command of the commander in front of him. Isn't it okay if you say it well? Daniel's voice suddenly sounded, but in the ears of Hayden and the Navy, it gradually faded silently. Hayden ignored this person. After giving orders to his men, he looked at the crowd again and said, Okay. Today's show has ended. If you don't leave by yourself, the Navy prison is waiting for you. Then, the crowd onlookers then reacted differently. However, they only cursed secretly in their respective mouths, leaving this street while talking. After all, the aura emanating from the Navy body, the real suffocation in the air just now, is not always something to bluff people. Everyone left one by one, and the crowded streets were now clean. Only the big gang tied up by various things, Hayden and his team of a dozen people in the Navy, and finally the big sisters who were originally on the street on both sides of the hotel entrance. The tension in the air also disappeared at this time. At this time, the big sisters also realized that the little Navy brother in front of them was a powerful little brother. And powerful men can even more arouse their